Stick to therapy.
My name is Timothy Perez, and back in 2018, I decided to take my RV up to Lake Superior Provincial Park in Ontario for some peace and quiet. Being cooped up in the city was starting to make me feel like a sardine in a can, and I figured some fresh air might do me good. Besides, I've always believed that nature and I have an understanding. I don't bother it, and it doesn't bother me. I've never been the rugged outdoorsman type. My idea of hiking involves a well-marked trail and a picnic at the end. But the allure of the open road and the promise of solitude were too tempting to pass up. So I packed my essentials: a week's worth of snacks, a stack of books I'd been meaning to read, and enough coffee to fuel a small army. The drive was picturesque, with the trees flaunting their autumn colors like they were showing off. By the time I reached the park, the sun was casting a golden hue over the lake, and I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I found a secluded spot near the water, set up camp, and made myself a cup of coffee. This isn't so bad, I thought. Maybe I should write a book. Aller's Adventures in the Wild. As dusk settled, I decided to light a campfire. There's something hypnotic about watching flames dance. It's like nature's television. I was roasting marshmallows, because what's a camping trip without s'mores? When I heard footsteps crunching leaves behind me. "Evening," a voice said. I turned to see a man standing at the edge of my campsite. He was tall and gaunt, with unkempt hair and clothes that looked like they'd been through a war zone. His eyes had a peculiar glint, one that made me instinctively uneasy. "Evening," I replied cautiously. "Can I help you with something?" "Just passing through," he said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Name's Jedediah, but folks call me Jed." "Aller?" I offered, not that he asked. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" He stepped closer, eyeing the marshmallows. "Sure is. Mind if I join you for a bit?" Every alarm bell in my head was ringing, but I didn't want to be rude. "Actually, I was just about to turn in. Long drive and all?" He tilted his head, the smile fading. "Fair enough. You take care now." "Will do," I said, watching as he disappeared into the shadows. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Well, that wasn't creepy at all," I muttered, deciding it was indeed time to call it a night. I extinguished the fire and secured the RV. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds chirping and the smell of pine. I convinced myself that I'd overreacted the night before. Maybe Jed was just a harmless drifter. After breakfast, I decided to explore a nearby trail. I left a note on the dashboard, a habit from watching too many true crime shows, grabbed my backpack, and set off. The trail was serene, with sunlight filtering through the canopy and leaves crunching underfoot. I was about an hour in when I noticed something odd, a campsite just off the path. But it looked abandoned. Curious, I ventured closer. Tents were collapsed and belongings were strewn about as if the occupants had left in a hurry. Unease settled in my stomach. This is how people end up in horror movies, I joked nervously to myself. I decided to head back. As I turned, I nearly bumped into Jed. "Whoa, you startled me," I exclaimed. "Sorry about that," he said, though he didn't sound sorry at all. "What brings you here?" "Just hiking," I replied, trying to sound casual. "You?" "Same," he said, his gaze fixed on me. "Shame about what happened here." "Yeah, looks like they left in a hurry," he chuckled softly. "Or something made them leave." I swallowed hard. Well, I should get going. "Don't let me keep you," he said, stepping aside. I walked briskly back to the trail, feeling his eyes on me the whole time. By the time I reached my RV, my heart was pounding. Maybe it's time to move on to another site, I thought, backing up when I heard rustling behind me. I spun around, half expecting Jed, but it was another man, this one wearing a park ranger uniform. "Sorry to startle you," he said. "I'm Ranger Thompson, just making my rounds." "Oh, thank goodness," I sighed in relief. "Everything all right? You look a bit shaken." I debated whether to mention Jed, but decided I might sound paranoid. "Just had an odd encounter earlier. Do you know a man named Jedediah around here?" The ranger's expression darkened. "Jedediah Clark? Yeah, goes by Jed," he nodded grimly. "We've had reports about him. I'd advise you to be cautious. He's not well." "Not well how?" I pressed. "Look, it's probably best if you relocate to a more populated area of the park," he suggested. Safety in numbers. Understood, I said, feeling a knot in my stomach. Thanks for the warning. As he left, I hurried to finish packing. Just as I was about to start the engine, I realized I'd left my map on the picnic table. I stepped out to grab it when something heavy struck me from behind. Everything went black. I awoke to a splitting headache and found myself tied to a chair inside what looked like an old cabin. The room was dimly lit by a single lantern, casting eerie shadows on the walls adorned with hunting trophies. "Rise and shine," came Jed's voice from the darkness. "What do you want?" I demanded, struggling against the ropes. He stepped into the light, a sinister smile playing on his lips. "Company. Is that too much to ask?" "Kidnapping isn't exactly the way to make friends," I retorted. He laughed. "Oh, but we're past pleasantries now." "Look, if it's money you want." "Money?" He interrupted. "You think this is about money?" "No, Aller. This is about survival." "Survival?" He began pacing. "City folks like you come here thinking you own the place, leaving your trash, making noise, disrupting the balance." "I'm sorry if I—" "Too late for apologies," he snapped. "You and your kind are a blight." "You're not making any sense," I said, trying to keep him talking while I worked at the knots. He pulled out a hunting knife, examining it thoughtfully. "Sense? Sense is living off the land, respecting its laws, not hiding in metal boxes on wheels." "Okay, noted. I'll just be on my way and promise to leave nature untouched," I said. He shook his head slowly. "Can't let you do that." Before I could respond, there was a loud bang on the door. "Jedediah Clark! This is Ranger Thompson! Open up!" Jed's eyes flickered with rage. "You just couldn't stay quiet, could you?" As he moved toward the door, adrenaline surged through me. I managed to loosen the ropes enough to free one hand. Without thinking, I grabbed a heavy wooden stool and swung with all my might. The stool connected with his shoulder, causing him to drop the knife and stumble. "You little—" he growled. I didn't wait for him to finish. I bolted for the back door, bursting into the cool night air. Later, I learned that Jedediah Clark was a former survivalist who lost his grip on reality after a tragic accident claimed his family. He turned his anguish into misplaced vengeance against anyone he deemed an intruder. Next time someone suggests a nature trip, I'll politely decline and say, "I'm outdoorsy in that I like having drinks on patios." My name is Dylan Gonzalez, and this happened back in 1996 in Wickford, Rhode Island, when I was still green enough to think that the hardest part of my job would be breaking up bar fights over the right way to cook clam chowder. I was raised not far from here, maybe 3 towns over, and I joined the local force for reasons that now seem almost naive, thinking I'd keep drunks out of trouble and help old folks feel safe at night. I'd been on the job a few months, and most days were quiet. The biggest case I'd handled involved a stolen bike that turned out to be borrowed by a neighbor's nephew. But things changed the evening that Merle, the mechanic who ran that grimy little garage by the Rotary, didn't lock up on time. I noticed his shop lights burning well past closing, and when I poked my head in, I found his body lying beside a half-fixed sedan. He'd been stabbed. Blood spread over the cement floor in a dark, uneven shape. His eyes were still open like he'd been interrupted mid-thought. My hand shook as I called for backup. I'd never seen anything like it. Chief Auror arrived first. He was older, gruff, with a head full of silver hair and a way of asking questions that made you feel like you'd already messed up. He didn't say much that night, just examined the body and knelt beside Merle's toolbox. He picked up a bent screwdriver, turned it in the light, and muttered something I couldn't quite hear. Then he rose and said, "Bradley, we're going to need to talk to everyone who was around tonight. Start with the folks at the marina. Merle always worked late when he expected some out-of-town car. Might have been a stranger." I remember stepping out of that garage, the smell of rust and cheap motor oil still in my nose, trying to steady my breathing. Across the street, Miss Varr was at her window, her face pale and creased. She must have seen the commotion. I gave her a nod that was supposed to feel reassuring, but I doubt it did. I felt unsteady myself, like I'd walked into a room expecting a quiet conversation and found a fight breaking out instead. Early the next morning, I visited the marina. A few men stood by the dock, coiling ropes and cursing the gulls. I asked if they'd seen anything strange last night. Mo shrugged it off. One man, Dieter, said he noticed a guy he didn't recognize, a lanky fellow with threadbare jeans and a dirty brown jacket. Said the guy was walking along the waterfront, peering into the windows of parked cars. Dieter remembered this man because of the way he tilted his head as if he had a stiff neck. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, Dieter said. Couldn't guess his age, maybe mid-30s, maybe older. He had this thin mustache and a sunken face, like he'd been living on nothing but coffee. Dieter went to talk to others, but nobody offered more than that. Just a stranger in town. Maybe a drifter. Maybe someone who had something to do with Merle's death. That night, I found myself driving slowly around Wickford's quieter streets, windows down, hoping to catch sight of someone who fit that description. I didn't think I'd know what to do if I spotted him. I wasn't exactly sure if I was ready to confront a murderer, but I wanted to at least feel productive. 2 days passed. I interviewed anyone who might have been near that garage. I pored over old records, asked about any similar cases, but got nothing. Then, on a damp Wednesday afternoon, we got another call. A fisherman named Roy was found dead behind the fish market. Same pattern. A knife wound. Nobody had heard a struggle. This time, there were muddy footprints leading away toward the back alley. We measured them. Men's size, about 10.5, and noted that the man likely dragged something along with him. There were scratches on the pavement, maybe from a broken crate he stepped over, or maybe from a piece of metal he carried. I felt my stomach twist. 2 murders in a week. Both victims town regulars. Roy was a kind man who gave free clams to kids on weekends. Seeing his body face down and cold made everything feel wrong. It pressed into my head the idea that I couldn't just patrol for unlocked doors and petty theft anymore. There was a killer here. Someone who moved fast and silent, then vanished. After Roy's murder, the tension around town grew. The local diner stayed crowded later, people clustering inside for safety. Chief Auror didn't give me much direction beyond keep asking around, as though he hoped I'd stumble into a clue. I tried not to show my fear, but my voice cracked when I told my neighbor Ruth to lock her doors. I made lame jokes about learning karate from a VHS tape, trying to keep things light. But nobody laughed. That Thursday night, I sat in the station house, just me and Deputy Cruz. He was older, always chewing gum. We were checking leads when we got a call from old Miss Vanny. She whispered that she saw a man outside her backyard, bending over something near her tool shed. Cruz and I rushed out, cruiser headlights cutting through the dark. We found footprints in the damp soil. No man. But we found something that made my heart pound, a bloody rag tucked under her porch steps. It smelled awful. I felt sweat along my collar. Whoever we were after, he'd been creeping close to homes, maybe looking for another victim. For the next several days, nobody died. I was grateful, but uneasy. It felt like he might be waiting for something. That weekend, Chief Auror organized a patrol schedule that made our lives miserable. Cruz and I walked the streets at odd hours, peering into alleys and lots. I barely slept, kept picturing that stranger's narrow face in my mind. Late Sunday afternoon, I visited the marina again. The boats bobbed in the greenish water. The gulls made a racket. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man hunched over near an abandoned bait shack, tugging something out from behind a pile of old lobster traps. I approached, trying to appear casual. "Hello there," I called. He turned slowly. It was the man Dieter had described. Thin face, mustache, jacket stained with who knows what, eyes ringed with tired shadows. He squinted at me like I was intruding on his personal business. "Evening," he said, voice quiet. I stepped closer, one hand near my holster. "I'm Dylan Gonzalez," I said. "Haven't seen you around before. You visiting?" He forced a grin. "Passing through," he said. Then he coughed and spat into the water. I noticed a slight tremble in his fingers and how he kept shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Heard about some trouble in town," he added, eyes narrowing. People getting hurt, that must be hard on a small force. I nodded, trying to read him. We're managing, I said. Say, what's your name? He frowned. Name's Victor. He wiped his mouth and stepped back. He smelled of sweat and rotting fish, like he'd been sleeping near spoiled catch. I should get going, he said, turning away. Before I could press him, he slipped behind the shack and around the corner. By the time I followed, he was gone. All I caught was a glimpse of his jacket disappearing behind a stack of crates. I had nothing to hold him on. But I knew something about the way he spoke, something about that grin. It made me uneasy. That night, I told Cruz about Victor. We decided to keep an eye on the marina. We borrowed an old fishing skiff and stayed out on the water, watching the docks from a distance. Huddled together under blankets, we barely spoke, just sipped coffee and tried to stay awake. Around midnight, we heard a muffled cry. We scrambled out of the boat and onto the dock. The sound came from one of the old storage sheds behind the harbor master's office. We crept forward. Police, Cruz called, a little louder this time. We heard a choking sound, then a heavy thump. The door to the shed was slightly open. I eased it open with my foot, flashlight high. Inside, a local handyman named Carl lay on the floor, his chest soaked in red. He wasn't moving. On the far side of the shed stood Victor, holding a long blade, his face twisted with anger. He looked startled to see us. Then he rushed forward. Cruz, watch out, I shouted, stepping in front. Victor swung the knife wildly. I jumped back, heart pounding, while Cruz tried to circle behind him. Victor slashed at Cruz's arm, opening a nasty wound. Cruz cried out and fell to one knee, clutching his arm. Drop it! I yelled, drawing my pistol. Victor sneered. He lunged toward me, the blade flashing in the weak light. I fired once, hitting him in the shoulder. He staggered but didn't go down. Instead, he threw himself at me, knocking me into a pile of old ropes. My back hit hard and the gun flew from my hand. Victor raised the knife again. I could smell his breath, stale and bitter, and see the sweat on his brow. I kicked at his knee, making him stumble. Cruz! I yelled. The gun! Cruz groaned, reaching out, trying to find the pistol, but it had slid under a crate. Victor's blade grazed my forearm. The pain was hot, immediate. I pushed him off and scrambled backward, grabbing a loose metal pipe from the floor. He rushed again, and I swung hard, catching him in the jaw. He grunted and fell sideways, the knife clattering to the ground. I grabbed his wrist and twisted. He howled and tried to break free. Cruz found the gun and aimed it at him, blood dripping from his own arm. Don't move, Cruz shouted, his voice shaking. Victor froze, eyes flicking between us. I pressed my knee into his back and wrenched his arm up. He whimpered. I patted him down and yanked his knife away. My heart hammered, and I could barely think straight, but I knew we had him. We called for backup and an ambulance. Victor spat curses at us, calling us cowards, saying we had no idea who he was or why he did what he did. I didn't care about his motives right then. I cared about Cruz's wound and the bodies Victor had left behind. Carl was gone, just like Merle and Roy. The paramedics said nothing could be done. The quiet little marina now had a line of yellow tape and half the town staring. We booked Victor into custody. He said nothing after that initial outburst. Chief Orr looked relieved when he saw who we'd caught, though he didn't praise us. He just nodded and said, "Good work, Thompson." Cruz got patched up at the clinic, and I needed a few stitches on my arm. The doc asked me, "You okay?" I nodded, though I felt hollow. I spent the rest of that night in my small apartment, the TV off, sipping weak tea. I replayed the fight in my mind. I kept thinking of Carl's last moments, how scared he must have been. I thought of Victor's strange grin at the marina, the quiet way he slid into the shadows when I first met him. He was just a man. No special powers, no monstrous strength, just a desperate, violent man who chose to kill. For what reason? Money? Anger? Some twisted urge? I didn't know, and I guess I never would. But I realized something. Sometimes evil doesn't come dressed in cliches. Sometimes it's just a tired-looking man in a stained jacket passing through your town. The next morning, Wickford felt different. The dockside market opened late. The diners were quieter. People looked my way and nodded, thankful, maybe, but not sure what to say. I still felt uneasy, like my job had changed forever. I'd never asked for heroic moments or epic showdowns. I wanted to keep things simple, to be the guy who told kids to wear helmets and helped old folks find their keys. But now, I knew what violence looked like when it crept into a small place like ours. Chief Auror told me Victor would face trial in Providence. We handed him off, and that was that. No fanfare, no big speeches, just paperwork and a bandage on my arm that I'd have to change daily. I kept my uniform pressed and my humor intact. But I knew I'd stepped into a new understanding of what it meant to wear that badge. Sometimes you find yourself alone in a shed, fighting against a killer with nothing but an old pipe in hand. I guess that's the kind of thing they never really teach you at the academy. And so it ended. But every time I passed that old marina, I remembered the sounds of that night. Cruz's shout, Victor's heavy breath, and Carl lying still. And I wondered how close we came to losing everything. My name is Brian Patel. I was 30 years old when it happened. People think journalists are fearless, but that's not true. We chase stories because we want to expose the truth. The problem is, sometimes the truth is something you were never supposed to find. This happened in Devil's Millhopper Geological State Park, Florida. I'd driven my RV out there looking for a fresh start, or at least that's what I told myself. The truth was, my career was in shambles. A failed expose on a corrupt politician had left me blacklisted from every major news outlet. No one wanted to hire a journalist who fabricated evidence, even though I knew what I saw was real. So I ran, packed up my things, and took a long drive through Florida's forests, looking for something, anything, to make sense of my life again. That's how I ended up here, parked on the edge of the massive sinkhole they called Devil's Millhopper. The locals told me not to camp too close. They spoke about strange noises, people who went missing, stories of voices calling your name in the night. I laughed it off. I didn't believe in that kind of thing. But I was a journalist without a job, and this was as good a story as any. I set up my RV, grabbed my camera, and hiked down into the sinkhole. The trail led into a deep, bowl-shaped pit surrounded by dense trees and waterfalls trickling from the limestone walls. It was beautiful in a way that made me uneasy, like something ancient was watching me. An hour in, I found something I wasn't expecting. A backpack. It was lying near the base of a tree, half covered in mud, the zipper broken. Clothes were strewn around it, along with a phone, cracked, battery dead. A woman's ID peeked out from the front pocket. Sarah Bennett, age 27. I stared at it, my stomach twisting. Had she just left it here? Gotten lost? Then I heard the scream. It came from deeper in the woods, a sharp, ragged cry that cut through the silence and stopped just as suddenly. I ran toward the sound. The trees grew thicker, and the path became harder to follow. I forced my way through, my breath loud in my ears. Then I stopped. A man stood just ahead, near the base of the sinkhole. He was tall, lean, wearing an old flannel shirt and jeans that were too clean for someone who had been hiking. His hair was slicked back, his skin pale. He smiled. "You shouldn't be here." I hesitated. "Did you hear that scream?" He tilted his head. "What scream?" I held up the ID. "This girl. She lost her bag out here. Did you see her?" The man stepped forward. "Maybe. A lot of people get lost here." Something about him put me on edge. His smile was too wide, too knowing. I backed away. "I should get back," I muttered. His grin widened. "Of course. I'll see you soon, Brian." My blood went cold. I hadn't told him my name. I turned and walked quickly back to my RV, refusing to look back. That night, I locked the doors, checked the windows twice, and tried to sleep. But I couldn't. At some point, I heard something outside, a soft tapping on the RV door. My heart pounded. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the window, peering out. No one was there. Then in the reflection, I saw movement behind me. I spun around, but the RV was empty. The next morning, I found something scratched into the dirt just outside the door. "Let me out." I packed my things. I was leaving. As I stepped outside, I nearly ran into someone. It was the man from the woods. "Leaving so soon?" he asked. I stepped back, gripping my keys. "Yeah, something feels off here." His expression flickered just for a second, like he was disappointed. "That's a shame. You were supposed to stay longer." I forced a laugh. "Guess I'll have to come back some other time." He stared at me. Then he grinned again. "You've been here before." My stomach clenched. "What? You don't remember?" He took a step forward. "You were here last year. Same RV, same excuse, but last time you didn't leave." My fingers tightened around my keys. "I don't know what the hell you're talking about." "You will," he whispered. I jumped into the RV, locked the door, and started the engine. The man didn't move. He just watched me. As I drove away, I caught one last glimpse of him in the side mirror. He wasn't smiling anymore. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. That night at a gas station an hour away, I found something in my back seat. A phone. Cracked. Battery dead. Sarah Bennett's phone. I never went back to Devil's Millhopper, but sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear his voice. "You've been here before." My name's Jeffrey Walker, and this happened back in 1990, in the thick woods of the Boundary Waters up in Minnesota. Now, don't go thinking I'm the type to rattle easily. I'm Ojibwe. Been tracking and hunting since I was a kid, and that's the sort of training that gets you comfortable with the land and everything in it. But there are some things that not even a lifetime in the woods can prepare you for. It was just me and two others from the reservation, Joe White and Ethan Littlecloud. We'd all planned to camp, set some snares, maybe even see what was biting in the lake. Joe was our practical joker, thought everything was funny. And Ethan, well, he was the quiet type, good at reading the land, real level-headed. So if things got tense, I trusted we'd be smart enough to stick together. We hiked in early that morning. There's this old ranger cabin along the lake, barely standing and about as appealing as roadkill stew, but it was good enough to drop our gear. By evening, we'd set up snares and cast our lines without much luck. The forest was thick, the kind where you feel the weight of the trees pressing in from all sides. Sound travels strange out there, muffled, like you're walking underwater. I chalked it up to the dense foliage, but Joe was already making jokes about cursed forests and ghost stories. At one point, Ethan, who doesn't get rattled by much, muttered something about the silence. Birds, squirrels, even the usual mosquito hum seemed absent. I brushed it off, figured we'd just set up camp in a quiet patch. That night, after a few swigs from Joe's flask and a bad attempt at telling ghost stories, we heard something out there. Now, we'd all heard strange noises in the woods before. Things that can send a shiver down your back if you're out there alone. But this was different. Low, grating, like the sound of heavy logs being dragged against each other. Joe started laughing, saying it was just Ethan's stomach, but there was an edge in his voice. He was joking to cover something up. Ethan squinted into the darkness, and I could tell he didn't like this one bit. The sound came closer, slow but steady, like whatever it was didn't mind being heard. Then came a wet thump, like something heavy being dropped, followed by silence. The three of us froze, ears pricked up like hounds. Then the sound started again, closer this time. I could see Ethan's face had gone stone-cold serious. Joe whispered something about checking it out, trying to seem braver than he was. Ethan motioned for silence, then tilted his head toward the trees. He was good with gestures, and what he was saying was clear. He didn't like this one bit. I told Joe to sit tight, but he was already grabbing a flashlight, muttering that he was just going to have a look. As soon as Joe clicked on that flashlight, the beam caught something about 55 yards out, halfway hidden behind the trees. The first thing I saw was that it was tall, easily 6, maybe 8 feet, with long limbs ending in thick, clawed fingers that looked more like gnarled branches than anything human. It had this bent, hunched posture, as if it was studying us, deciding whether we were worth the effort. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and the muscles underneath rippled like a deer's hide. Its face was narrow and stretched back, almost lupine, with a snout like a wolf, but longer, more angular. But the worst part? Its mouth was open, and I swear, the teeth were jagged, mismatched, like a bear trap someone had tried to put back together wrong. Joe whispered something that sounded suspiciously like a prayer, and for a second, I was tempted to join him. The creature moved closer, not in a lunge, but this slow, deliberate stride, like it had all the time in the world. I'd been stalked by mountain lions before, had coyotes trail me for hours, but this was something else. Ethan nudged me, his voice barely a breath, suggesting we slip back to the cabin. I nodded, trying not to make any sudden moves. Joe, on the other hand, looked like he was about to bolt, his hand clamped around that flashlight like it was his lifeline. We edged backward, every muscle tense. But Joe slipped on a root. The creature's head whipped toward us, and it let out this dry, rasping sound, like sandpaper scraping against rock. Joe was back on his feet in a second, but that was all the invitation it needed. Ethan shouted for us to run, and we bolted. I didn't look back, just pumped my legs as fast as they'd go, hearing Joe's labored breathing right behind me. The thing gave chase, and it wasn't slow. I could hear it thrashing through the underbrush, getting closer with every step. The sound of branches snapping and something scraping over stones and dirt was deafening. I remember thinking we'd make it back to the cabin, that we'd slam the door and huddle inside until dawn. But then Joe stumbled. This time, he didn't get back up in time. Ethan and I turned just as it reached him. The thing's arm shot out, grabbing Joe by the shoulder and dragging him backward like he weighed nothing. Joe screamed, a sound that'll stick with me longer than I care to admit. Ethan wanted to go back for him. I could see it in his face, but the look in my eyes must have told him there was no point. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't something we could fight off with a hunting knife or a flashlight. We made it back to the cabin, slammed the door shut, and barricaded it with whatever we could find. We huddled there in the dark, waiting, barely breathing. The sounds outside grew quiet, but every so often, I thought I could hear something scraping against the walls. Ethan whispered that it was just the wind, but we both knew better. At first light, we crept out. The forest looked different, like the trees were hiding something, like the ground itself had shifted. Joe's body wasn't where he'd been taken, but there was a trail of disturbed earth and bits of fabric. Following it felt like a death sentence, but we couldn't just leave him. Not without knowing what happened. The trail led us to a small clearing about a mile out, where the soil was darker, stained with something I didn't want to examine too closely. And there, scattered among the leaves, were bones. Not all of them Joe's, either. Some looked older, gnawed down and broken. Like whatever that thing was, it had been feeding out here for a long time. We didn't linger. We headed straight back to the ranger station, filed a report, and were met with a look that told us we wouldn't be taken seriously. They called it a bear attack in the paperwork, but neither of us believed that for a second. As for Joe, they found bits of his clothing and some bones, enough to confirm he was dead, but the rest was chalked up to scavengers. Ethan stopped coming out to the woods after that, and I don't blame him. Years later, I heard whispers from some of the older folks on the res about an old creature they'd warned people about, a mix between a man and a beast, something that hunted in the quietest parts of the forest. They didn't give it a name, just said it was something that didn't belong here, something that waited. I don't go out there anymore either. And if you ever find yourself near the Boundary Waters, maybe think twice before wandering too far from camp. My name is Kevin Scott. I was 32 years old when it happened. I'd been living out of my RV for the past 8 months, traveling across the country, writing about forgotten places and hidden gems. It was supposed to be an escape from my ex-wife, from my old life, from the custody battle I knew I was never going to win. This happened in Little Talbot Island, Florida. I picked the spot because it was quiet, off the beaten path, and beautiful in a way that most beaches weren't. No high-rises, no tourists, just rolling dunes, thick patches of forest, and the endless stretch of the Atlantic. Perfect for the kind of travel blog post I was planning. I pulled into the campsite late in the afternoon. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the sand. The ranger at the entrance had given me a strange look when I told him I was camping alone. "Storm's coming in," he said, eyeing the darkening sky. "Might want to stay closer to town." I shrugged it off. A little bad weather didn't scare me. I'd been through worse. I parked the RV in a secluded spot near the dunes, set up my gear, and spent the evening taking photos. As the sky darkened, a thick mist rolled in from the water, swallowing the landscape. It happened so fast, like a wave crashing over the dunes. Within minutes, the world beyond my headlights was gone. That's when I saw them. Two pinpricks of red light, barely visible through the fog, hovering just above the dunes. At first, I thought they were taillights from another camper's vehicle, but they didn't move. They just watched. I blinked, and they were gone. I laughed to myself. Probably just my imagination. I'd been on the road too long. That night, I locked the doors and stretched out on the tiny bed in my RV, listening to the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. But sleep didn't come easy. At some point, I heard something, a soft, rhythmic scraping. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound came from outside, right next to the RV. I reached for my flashlight and crept toward the window, moving slowly, carefully. My breath fogged up the glass. I saw footprints in the sand. Large, deep, they circled the RV, stopping right at the door. I yanked the curtain shut. The next morning, I found something else. A message carved into the sand just a few feet from my RV. "Don't run." The letters were long, jagged, like they'd been made with something sharp. I took a photo, my hands shaking. Maybe some was messing with me. Maybe this was a local trying to scare off outsiders. Or maybe it was something else. I spent the afternoon hiking the trails, trying to shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. I kept telling myself there was a logical explanation. The wind, the tide, my own paranoia. But then I found the tent. It was buried beneath the dunes, half collapsed, the fabric shredded. Inside there were old camping supplies, a torn sleeping bag, and a journal. The pages were damp, the ink smudged, but I could still read some of the entries. Something is watching me. Every night it gets closer. I saw the eyes again. They never blink. I tried to leave, but the tide. I keep walking in circles. I don't know if it's me or this place, but I can't find my way out. It waits until I'm too tired to fight. I can hear it breathing. I closed the journal and stood there, heart hammering. Had someone else been here before me? Had they gotten out? As the sun set, I made a decision. I was leaving in the morning. That night, the power in my RV flickered. The radio crackled, the station tuning itself, static, giving way to something else, a voice, my own voice. "Stay, stay, stay." I lunged forward and turned the radio off. My reflection in the dark screen stared back at me, but for a split second, I swore. I swore I saw it blink. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it, something just outside watching. At some point, I heard scratching. Not at the door, on the roof. Something was up there. I held my breath, gripping my pocket knife, listening as the slow, deliberate movement shifted above me, claws against metal. Then silence. Then a voice. My own voice, whispering from just beyond the RV. "Mike," I didn't move. "Mike, let me in." I pressed a hand over my mouth. It sounded exactly like me, like I was standing right outside. A shadow passed across the window. I didn't sleep after that. By sunrise, I was ready to go. I threw my things into the RV, turned the key. Nothing. The engine was dead. I sat there, breathing hard, trying to stay calm. I had jumper cables. I could fix this. I could get out. Then I heard footsteps, slow, dragging. I turned my head and saw them. The red eyes. Not just one pair. 3, 4, 5. They hovered above the dunes, blinking in and out of existence, moving closer. I grabbed my flare gun and bolted out the door. I ran, not toward the road, toward the beach. The tide was high, the waves crashing against the shore. If I could just make it to the water, maybe they wouldn't follow. Behind me, the footsteps grew faster. I turned, raised the flare gun, and fired. The light illuminated the dunes for just a moment, and I saw them. Tall, thin, moving wrong, like marionettes with their strings tangled. No faces, just those glowing red eyes. And long, gaping mouths. Then they screamed. The sound was worse than anything I'd ever heard. Worse than gunfire. Worse than sirens. Worse than the worst moments of my life. I turned and sprinted for the water. Then, Nothing. The next thing I remember, I was in a fishing boat, an old man shaking me awake. "Jesus, son," he muttered. "What the hell were you doing out there?" I looked back at the shore, but the beach was empty, the dunes undisturbed. They were gone. Or maybe they had never left. I never went back for my RV, never even tried. I didn't care about my gear, my laptop, my camera. Because when I checked my phone later, I found something that made my blood run cold. A photo. The last picture I had taken. Me, standing on the beach. And behind me, half visible through the mist, the red eyes, watching. I don't know what they are, but I know they're still there. My name's Roy Walker, and this all happened back in 2013 in the middle of a fishing trip near Banff, Canada. My friends always say I'm the reluctant outdoorsman, so you can imagine how convincing they had to be to get me to join. My idea of a weekend is more like catching up on movies than catching fish, but they swore it'd be a relaxing getaway. So I figured, what could go wrong? I joined my friends Greg, Tim, and Jesse at this little cabin they'd rented just outside Banff. Right from the start, the place felt weird. It was miles from any civilization, hidden in a dense cluster of trees with just enough space between them for sunlight to make it through. But they insisted it was all part of the charm. Greg went on about how peaceful it would be to get away from it all. No phones, no internet, just us and nature. The first day was admittedly not bad. We grilled, threw back some beers, and shared a few laughs around a fire. Greg was the only one genuinely interested in fishing, so we mostly left him to it while Tim and Jesse tried, unsuccessfully, to teach me how to set up a proper tent. It was a pretty good setup. But that was before the night noises started. That first night, just as the fire began to die down and the guys started drifting off to their tents, I heard something. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. A strange, low noise that didn't fit with the usual sounds of crickets or rustling leaves. I nudged Tim, who muttered something about my city boy imagination, and went back to sleep. I told myself he was right. I probably just wasn't used to all these forest sounds. But the next day, Greg found something weird down by the lake where he'd been fishing alone. He showed us a patch of trampled grass and broken branches leading from the water up to the edge of the woods. "I'm telling you, it was like something big came up from the lake," he insisted. Tim rolled his eyes. "What, like a bear?" Greg shook his head. "Nah, bigger, and there aren't any fresh bear tracks around here." Despite Greg's concern, we brushed it off as him trying to spook us. The day went by as planned. More fishing, more jokes, more beers. I almost forgot about the noise from the night before. Almost. Later that night, though, as we sat around the fire, the same sound came again. This time, it was louder and closer. It was like a cross between a howl and a snarl, low and drawn out, enough to set my teeth on edge. Jesse stopped mid-sentence, and we all looked at each other, our faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. Nobody said a word. Then the sound came again, this time from the direction of the lake, and it was getting closer. Tim laughed nervously. Maybe it's Greg's lake monster come back to check on us. He was trying to play it cool, yeah, but I could tell he was on edge. We decided to head inside the cabin and lock the doors, just in case. The walls were thin, and it wasn't the most secure structure, but it felt safer than being out in the open. We set up camp in the cramped living room, each of us sleeping on whatever piece of furniture we could find. I was just drifting off when I heard it again. But this time, it was so close that I felt it vibrate through the floorboards. There was something prowling outside, something heavy that dragged its feet, moving back and forth in front of the cabin. We were all dead quiet. Even Tim had lost his usual bravado. Then came a thud against the door, like something or someone was pressing on it, testing it. Tim held a knife. Jesse had a flashlight. Greg had a fishing rod. I nearly laughed out loud at the absurdity of it. But when I saw the door visibly bow under the pressure, I stopped breathing. Whatever was outside, it wasn't human, and it was way too strong. Greg whispered, "Do you think it's like some animal we don't know about?" I didn't have an answer. Nobody did. Another thud hit the door, harder this time. We could hear wood splintering. That's when Jesse, holding the flashlight, peered through the gap in the curtains. "Oh God," he whispered, barely audible. His face went pale, and he took a shaky step back. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. He just kept staring at the door, his mouth moving like he was trying to form words that wouldn't come. Finally he muttered, It looked like a wolf, but not right, too tall, and it was standing." Greg groaned. "This isn't happening." But it was. We all heard it. Whatever was outside let out a kind of grunt, something almost human but animalistic, like a predator toying with its prey. I felt like I was going to pass out from the tension. Then suddenly, it went silent. Just when we thought it might have left, the noise came again. But this time from the back of the cabin. It was circling us, studying us, waiting. We barely slept. I spent the night clutching a fire poker, as if that would do any good. When dawn broke, the thing was gone, but the unease lingered. We ventured out to inspect the damage, and sure enough, the door was splintered. Deep claw marks gouged the wood. The ground outside was covered in strange tracks, larger than anything I'd ever seen. They looked like oversized wolf prints, but elongated, as if whatever made them had been walking on two legs. We should have left right then. But Greg, ever the stubborn one, insisted we stay. "It's just an animal," he argued, "probably a weird-looking bear or something. We'll be fine during the day." And for most of the day, we were. We didn't venture too far from the cabin, and we stayed within sight of each other. But as the sun began to set, the tension in the air returned. It was like the forest itself was holding its breath. That night, it came back. This time, it didn't stop at the door. Whatever it was began circling the cabin, scraping at the windows, dragging its claws along the walls. We could hear it sniffing, as if trying to find a way inside. I was terrified out of my mind. But there was nowhere to go, nowhere to run. Just when we thought it was going to break through, it stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the noise. We held our breath, listening, waiting for any sign that it had left. Then, we heard a new sound. A scratching, coming from under the floorboards. Jesse cursed, and we scrambled back, watching the floor as something pushed against it from underneath. It was clawing its way up, trying to break through. I could see the boards start to buckle and crack, and I knew we were seconds away from coming face to face with whatever nightmare was beneath us. In a panic, Greg shouted, "The truck! We can make a run for it." We didn't need convincing. We bolted out the door, barely pausing to grab our things, and sprinted to the truck. I could hear it behind us, breaking through the cabin floor. Its snarl. No, not a snarl. Something worse. Greg fumbled with the keys, cursing while Tim and Jesse yelled for him to hurry. I looked back, and I saw it. Just for a second, a hulking figure, covered in matted fur, towering over the cabin. Its limbs were too long. It moved in a jerky, unnatural way, like it was learning how to use its own body. Greg finally got the truck started, and we tore out of there. The thing chased us down the dirt road. I don't know how far it followed us, but we didn't stop until we were miles away. And to this day, I swear, sometimes, when I'm alone, I can still hear that scratching. When we finally reached a town, we stumbled out, dazed and exhausted, trying to explain what had happened, but no one believed us. The police found the cabin in shambles, claw marks everywhere, but they chalked it up to a bear. No one could explain the tracks, though. They were too big, too wrong. I heard rumors later, stories about strange creatures in the Canadian wilderness, sightings of things that shouldn't exist. Whatever it was, it didn't seem to fit into any category I'd ever heard of. It was something old, something that belonged in the shadows of ancient forests, not in the world I knew. As for us, we don't talk about it much. We keep in touch, sure, but that night sits between us like a weight we can't shake off. And sometimes when I'm alone, I swear I can still hear those scratching noises echoing from somewhere deep in the night. My name is Lucas Norris. I was 38 years old when this happened, and I don't expect anyone to believe me. Hell, if I weren't the one telling this story, I wouldn't believe me either. I had spent my entire career as a marine biologist, specializing in Florida's underground rivers and swamp ecosystems. I knew the science of these waters, the tides, the wildlife, the way nature worked in perfect, predictable patterns. But what I saw in Tate's Hell wasn't science. It wasn't natural. I took this trip to be alone. My divorce had been messy, my reputation in the academic world was in tatters, and I had nothing left but my camera and my RV. I told myself this would be an escape, a week-long trip through the swamps of Tate's Hell State Forest, documenting Florida's lesser-known river species. I parked my RV deep in the forest near an old dirt road that led to the Ocklawaha River. No cell service, no tourists, no noise, just me, the trees, and the black water stretching into the fog. The first 2 days were peaceful. I kayaked through the river, took photos of egrets, turtles, gators. The stillness of the place had a weight to it, like a place the world had forgotten. But by the third night, the stillness turned into something else. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Rotting fish, algae, something decaying, thick enough to make me gag. But the river was clear, the banks undisturbed. I checked my kayak, my supplies. Nothing. That night, I woke up soaked in swamp water. I jolted upright in my RV bed, my shirt clinging to my chest, my hair dripping. I knew I had locked the door, but when I checked, it was wide open. Muddy footprints led from the river to my bed, not mine. I told myself I must have sleepwalked. It had happened before. Stress, exhaustion, logical explanations. But then I found the footprints leading back outside. The next morning, I went out to the river with my camera, determined to catch whatever was messing with me. The water was still, untouched. But as I raised my camera, I noticed something strange in my reflection. I was standing still, but my reflection wasn't. It shifted, lagging behind me like an old video buffering. My breath hitched. I waved my hand. The reflection followed, but slower. I stepped back, shaking. Then I saw her. At first, I thought it was a log floating just beneath the surface. But then long strands of red hair rose up through the water, tangled and drifting. I squinted, my heart thudding. The shape beneath the hair shifted, a pale face rising from the depths. A woman. Her eyes were dark, empty pits, and her mouth, it was stretching. Wider and wider, rows of jagged teeth spiraling into the void. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a tree root, and I hit the ground hard. When I looked up, she was gone. The water was still. The air was dead silent. I grabbed my camera, hands shaking, and checked the photos. Nothing. The water was empty. But I knew what I saw. That night, the whispers started. I was in my RV, writing notes, when my radio crackled to life. Static. Then a faint, wet voice. "Come in the water." I froze. My radio was turned off. The voice whispered again, closer this time. "Lucas." My blood turned to ice. I grabbed my knife and stepped outside, scanning the tree line with my flashlight. And then I heard it, sloshing footsteps, dragging through the water. I swung my light toward the river. She was standing in it, waist deep, staring at me. Her skin was gray, slick with algae. Her red hair floated unnaturally around her face. But her mouth, God, her mouth was stretching open, her jaw unhinging like a snake's. Black void inside, like she was about to swallow the night whole. I bolted inside, locked the RV, and forced myself to breathe. I told myself it was a dream, a hallucination, a trick of the swamp gas. But when I woke up the next morning, my tires were slashed. My boat was half sunk in the river, and outside my door, the muddy footprints were back. I had to get out. I threw my things into my bag, my hands shaking. I could hike to the main road, find help, call a tow truck. But as I stepped outside, I saw something half buried in the mud beneath my RV. I swallowed, digging with my hands, pulling until my fingers found something solid. A skull. But not just any skull. It had a crack along the temple, a missing molar. I knew that skull. It was mine. I dropped it, scrambling back, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then I heard her voice. "You've been here before." I spoke, and there she was, standing at the edge of the trees. Grinning, memories slammed into me, flashes of something I couldn't explain. I saw myself arriving in the RV, setting up camp. I saw her dragging me into the water, her nails slicing into my arms. I saw myself screaming, drowning, sinking into the red-stained depths, and then nothing. And then, waking up in my RV on the first day of the trip, over and over and over. I wasn't on my first trip. I had been here before, and I had died here before. I staggered backward. No, no, this isn't real. She laughed, her voice like breaking glass. It will be again. The world blurred. The trees spun. The last thing I saw was her hand reaching for me. Then, blackness. I woke up in my RV. The morning sun was rising. My boat was fine. My tires were untouched. My camera was in its case. The memory card empty. It was the first day of my trip. But when I looked in the mirror, my reflection lagged. And outside, in the river, the red woman waited. I used to think there wasn't much in the world that could shake me. After all, my life had been a string of adrenaline-fueled missions, each more dangerous than the last. My name is Roland Van Broek, and I've spent the last 16 years working for a shadowy unit buried deep within the US government, tasked with hunting the things that aren't supposed to exist. Cryptids, monsters, creatures that lurk in the forgotten corners of the world. You name it. I've probably seen it or something like it. But there's something about the ocean, the way it stretches out into infinity, swallowing light and hope alike, that's always put a knot in my stomach. So when the call came about a string of disappearances off the coast of Washington state, I was less than thrilled to be the one selected for the mission. The waters there, they say, are haunted by old spirits. Turns out, old spirits were the least of anyone's worries. The local authorities were baffled. 5 people had vanished without a trace in just under a month, all experienced divers, all pulled into the same stretch of water near a place the locals called Dead Man's Cove. No bodies were ever recovered, no distress calls made. They were just gone. My partner for this mission was a man named Cliff Delaney, a former Navy SEAL with nerves of steel and a sense of humor drier than the Mojave Desert. He'd been in the unit almost as long as I had, and we'd been through hell together more times than I could count. If there was one man I wanted by my side when things went south, it was Cliff. We arrived in the small coastal town of Port Lowe, where the locals eyed us warily. We weren't wearing our usual uniforms. Instead, we blended in, looking like just another pair of tourists. It wasn't hard. This place was practically a ghost town. The tourists had stopped coming when the first diver went missing, and the locals weren't too keen on venturing out into the water anymore. Dead Man's Cove was about a mile offshore, a stretch of rocky coastline that dipped sharply into the Pacific. We chartered a small boat and headed out. The sky was overcast, the water cheap air was thick with the smell of salt and something else, something foul, like the stench of rotting fish left out in the sun too long. Ever get the feeling you're being watched? Cliff asked, breaking the silence. All the time, I replied, scanning the horizon. But this time, it's worse. We reached the cove and anchored the boat. The water below was a deep, dark blue, almost black, as if it was hiding something far worse than the usual predators of the sea. We suited up in our diving gear, checking our equipment one last time. Neither of us spoke as we slipped into the water, descending into the depths. The world around us turned into a cold, silent void. The light from the surface faded quickly, leaving us with only the beams of our flashlights cutting through the inky blackness. The deeper we went, the colder it became, and that foul smell grew stronger, clawing at the back of my throat. We hit the seabed at about 100 feet. The ground was littered with jagged rocks and thick strands of seaweed that swayed eerily in the current. We moved forward carefully, scanning our surroundings. Something was off. The usual signs of marine life were absent. No fish darting about, no crabs scuttling along the sand. It was as if the ocean had emptied itself, leaving only silence in its wake. Then we found the first piece of evidence, a mangled diving mask, half buried in the sand. It was cracked, the straps torn, as if by some tremendous force. Cliff picked it up, turning it over in his hands before looking at me with a grim expression. We were on the right track, but it wasn't exactly comforting. We pressed on, the tension between us palpable. The water around us felt thicker, more oppressive, like we were swimming through syrup. Then, Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a flicker of something huge moving just beyond the reach of our lights. Cliff saw it too, and we both stopped dead, hovering in the water. I swung my light in the direction of the movement, catching a brief glimpse of something massive and sinuous, its body undulating with an unnatural grace. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized just how wrong this thing was. It wasn't a fish or a shark or anything I'd ever seen in the ocean before. It was more like a giant eel, but far more twisted and grotesque. Its body was covered in dark, slimy scales, and its head was wrong. Too large, too misshapen, like someone had tried to sculpt a creature out of nightmares and failed. I signaled to Cliff, and we began to retreat, moving slowly, trying not to attract its attention. But it was too late. The creature turned toward us, and I caught a glimpse of its mouth, rows upon rows of needle-sharp teeth, more than any natural creature should possess, each one as long as my hand. Then it attacked. It moved with blinding speed, faster than anything that size had a right to. It struck Cliff first, wrapping its body around him, dragging him down into the sand with a force that sent a shockwave through the water. I tried to reach him, but the creature was too strong, too fast. In a matter of seconds, it had torn into him, and the water around us turned crimson with blood. Cliff's scream was muffled by the water, but it cut through me like a knife. I was paralyzed for a moment, unable to move, unable to process what was happening. Then the creature's head snapped around, its empty, hollow gaze locking onto me. It released Cliff's body, which floated lifelessly to the seabed, and lunged at me, jaws wide open. Instinct kicked in, and I fired my spear gun. The spear struck the creature in the side, and it let out a horrifying gurgling noise that sent chills down my spine. But it didn't slow down. I barely had time to get out of the way as it barreled past me, its body crashing into the rocks, with a force that sent debris flying. I swam as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my heart racing. The surface felt impossibly far away, but I didn't dare look back. I could feel it behind me, closing in, its presence like a dark shadow over my soul. I made it to the boat, my hands shaking as I clawed my way on board. For a moment, everything was silent, except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then the boat lurched violently, nearly capsizing as the creature rammed it from below. Desperation clawed at my mind as I started the engine, pushing it to its limit. The boat shot forward, but the creature wasn't done with me. It chased us, slamming into the hull repeatedly, trying to knock me into the water. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the attack stopped. The creature must have given up, retreating back into the depths. I didn't stop, though. I kept the boat going until I reached the shore, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. The local authorities found Cliff's body the next day, washed up on the shore. The wounds were unlike anything they'd ever seen. Deep lacerations, bones crushed as if by some immense pressure. They had no explanation, and I wasn't about to give them one. I left Port Lowe that evening, leaving the investigation to the local authorities. The monster's corpse was found later, its massive body tangled in seaweed on a rocky outcrop near the shore. The thing was dead, and that was all that mattered. As I drove away from the town, the ocean stretched out beside me, endless and indifferent. I knew I would never return to that cursed place again. My mission was over, and so was the creature that had claimed my partner's life. My name is Dylan Gonzalez. I was 46 years old when this happened. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I know what I saw. I had been living out of my RV for almost a year by then, drifting from place to place, trying to outrun my grief. My daughter Lacey had died in a car crash 18 months earlier. I was at home, drunk on the couch when it happened. I should have been there. I should have picked her up, but instead, I got a call from a state trooper at 3 a.m. Lucci State Forest was the last place she had wanted to go. She had been obsessed with ghost stories, always reading about haunted places and local legends. A few weeks before the accident, she told me about a witch that haunted the forest, some woman who lured people in and made them disappear. "You should take me sometime," she had said. But I never did. So I went alone. I found a secluded spot near an overgrown trail, parked the RV, and shut everything off. No radio, no news, just the forest and me. The stillness wrapped around me like a cocoon. For the first time in a long time, I almost felt at peace. Until the sun went down. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No crickets, no wind. The trees didn't sway, even though I could feel the air moving. It was the kind of quiet that presses in on you, makes your ears ring. Then my radio crackled on. It was a police transmission. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the words, "This is dispatch. 911 caller reporting a vehicle collision on Highway 19. Possible fatality. Over." My hands started shaking. That was Lacey's accident. That was her crash. Then another voice broke through the static, whispering, "You don't have to be alone." I turned the radio off. The static kept going. I stepped outside, the hair on my arms standing on end, my breath puffing in the cold air. There were footprints in the dirt leading away from the RV. Barefoot, small, like a child's. They led into the woods, and I swear to God, I heard Lacey laugh. It was light, airy, her laugh. I hadn't heard it in over a year, but I knew it like I knew my own heartbeat. I should have run. I should have gotten in the RV and never looked back. But I didn't. I followed the footprints. They led me deep into the trees, down paths that hadn't been walked in decades. I stumbled over roots, my flashlight beam flickering as I moved forward. The laughter came again, closer now. Then I saw it. A house. It sat in the middle of a clearing, old and rotting, like something out of a nightmare. Spanish moss hung from the roof like curtains. The windows were broken, the door slightly ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wet earth and something sour, something rotten. I stepped over broken floorboards, my breath shallow. The walls were covered in carvings, symbols I didn't understand. Deep gouges in the wood, like someone had scratched them in with their fingernails. Then I saw the mirror. It was covered in dust, leaning against the wall. My reflection was dim, barely visible, but as I wiped the glass clean, my breath stopped. Because I wasn't looking at myself. Lacey was staring back at me. She was wearing the same hoodie she had on the last time I saw her hair in a messy bun. Her eyes were wet, pleading. She opened her mouth, but it wasn't her voice that came out. Trade places. I stumbled back, knocking over an old chair. My reflection was normal again. Just me, wild-eyed and shaking. Then the laughter turned into screaming. Outside, the trees moved. Their branches twisted like arms, their trunks bending in ways that weren't natural. And through them, something stepped forward. A woman. She was tall and thin, her tangled black hair matted with moss. Her skin was pale, stretched too tight over her bones. Her eyes were black, bottomless pits, but I could feel them pulling at me. She smiled. "Come to me." My body wouldn't move. The air turned thick, pressing against my chest. I gasped, trying to force my legs to run, but they wouldn't. Then I heard Lacey again. Crying, this time. She was out there. I knew she wasn't really, but God, it sounded like her. "Dad?" I ran. I bolted through the trees, branches slashing my face, my breath ragged. I didn't look back. Even when I heard her following me, her steps soft, deliberate. I reached the RV and slammed the door, locking it. My heart pounded as I backed away, my eyes locked on the window. She was standing there, just outside, smiling. The RV shook. She was trying to get in. The windows rattled. The walls groaned. And then, silence. I sat there until the sun came up. I don't know how long. I don't remember sleeping. When morning came, she was gone. I started the engine and drove until I hit pavement again. I didn't stop until I was 50 miles away. A few nights later, I got a text. An unknown number. We never forget our own. My name's Brian Patel, and this happened to me in the National Forest in Oregon. I grew up in Portland and spent most weekends hiking the trails with my dad. After he passed away, I kept the tradition alive, even though the solitude wasn't quite the same. I wasn't the sentimental type, but being out there brought some quiet to my otherwise loud, chaotic life as an electrician. That particular weekend, and I'd planned a 2-day solo trek, something to clear my head and test out some new gear. I wasn't an ultralight fanatic or anything, but I liked keeping things minimal. Just me, the trail, and whatever nature threw at me. My route started at Timberline Lodge and cut through some backcountry trails that didn't see much traffic. It was early morning when I set out, a thermos of black coffee in one hand and a map in the other. The first few hours were uneventful. The trails were damp from rain earlier in the week, and the scent of pine mixed with the occasional waft of mushrooms kept things pleasant. Around noon, I passed an older couple hiking with trekking poles. They waved but didn't stop to chat, which was fine by me. Solitude was the point. It was late afternoon when I noticed the first odd thing. I'd stopped at a clearing to refill my water from a nearby creek. The silence was too perfect. No birds, no rustling, nothing. It wasn't unusual for animals to scatter when a human came stomping through, but this was eerie, like the forest was holding its breath. I joked to myself that maybe I'd finally reached that perfect peace people were always yapping about in self-help books. As I climbed higher into the denser part of the forest, the feeling lingered. Every so often, I'd hear a snapping twig or see a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye, but I chalked it up to squirrels or deer. That changed when I reached the ridge. There was a campsite up there, or at least what was left of one. A collapsed tent lay flattened against the dirt, its poles bent at odd angles. Gear was scattered around like someone had emptied a backpack in a panic. What caught my attention was the cooler, one of those sturdy, bear-resistant kinds. Its lid was wrenched open, and deep claw marks gouged the plastic. I didn't recognize the pattern. It didn't look like bear claws. Whatever did it had talons. I poked around cautiously. A jacket with a name tag, Franklin, hung on a low branch, ripped down the middle like someone had tried to peel it off. That's when I saw the blood. Not a lot, but enough to know something had gone wrong. My stomach tightened. I didn't consider myself squeamish, but the combination of the silence and the blood made the air feel heavier, like it was pressing down on me. I didn't linger. I wasn't about to play hero and investigate further, but I also didn't want to turn back the way I'd come. The campsite had a bad vibe, and if someone was injured, I wasn't eager to meet whatever or whoever had caused it. I decided to push forward toward a secondary trailhead about 5 miles out. It wasn't on my original route, but it would get me out of there quicker. The trail narrowed as I descended into a gully. Thick undergrowth swallowed most of the light, and the temperature seemed to drop. My boots squelched in the damp earth as I pushed past ferns that slapped against my legs. About halfway down, I caught a foul odor, like rotting meat mixed with damp fur. My first thought was a dead animal, maybe a cougar kill left to rot, but it was strong enough to make my eyes water. Then I heard it, a low, deep rumbling noise that didn't sound natural. It wasn't a growl, but it wasn't mechanical either. It reverberated through the trees, making it impossible to pinpoint the direction. My fight or flight instincts kicked in, and I chose the third option, freeze. I crouched low, scanning the trees, my heart hammering in my chest. The noise came again, closer this time, followed by the crunch of heavy footsteps. I forced myself to move, creeping forward as quietly as possible. The trail curved ahead, and just as I rounded the bend, I saw it, or at least part of it. A massive, hulking shape loomed through the trees, crouched over something on the ground. Its limbs were grotesquely long, the joints bending in ways that didn't make sense. It had patches of wiry fur mottled with bare, pale skin. What struck me most was its posture, like a predator that had evolved to ambush. I stayed hidden behind a tree, trying not to breathe. Whatever it was feeding, its movements jerky and almost insect-like. The thing was tearing into something unrecognizable, its talons slicing through flesh with surgical precision. My stomach churned, and I fought the urge to retch. The smell was overwhelming. A sudden snap of a branch underfoot betrayed me. The creature's head shot up, swiveling unnaturally as it scanned for the source of the noise. I didn't get a clear view of its face, but I did see its teeth, rows of uneven serrated spikes that looked like they belonged in a shark, not on land. I bolted. Stealth be damned, I sprinted down the trail, branches clawing at my face and arms. The sound of pursuit was immediate, heavy footfalls crashing through the undergrowth. I didn't dare look back. My pack jostled against my shoulders as I weaved through the narrow trail, adrenaline pushing me faster than I thought possible. The trail forked ahead, and I veered left without thinking. Bad move. The path led to a dead end, a sheer drop-off into a ravine. My options were limited. Jump and risk breaking something, or turn and face the thing head-on. Neither seemed appealing. I scrambled up a boulder, hoping to gain some height and buy myself time. The creature burst through the trees moments later, its gangly frame silhouetted against the dim light. Up close, it was worse. Its skin was stretched too tight over its bones, and its movements were unnervingly smooth, like it was gliding rather than walking. It paused, tilting its head as if deciding whether I was worth the effort. I fumbled for the small knife in my pocket, knowing it was more symbolic than anything. The creature lunged forward, and I did the only thing I could. I threw my pack at it. The motion startled it, and it recoiled briefly, giving me enough time to leap down the side of the ravine. I tumbled hard, dirt and rocks tearing at my clothes as I slid to the bottom. My ankle twisted painfully, but I managed to scramble to my feet. The creature didn't follow immediately, but I could hear it pacing above, its claws scraping against the rocks as it searched for another way down. I limped through the ravine, following the trickle of water downstream. My only thought was to keep moving, to put as much distance as possible between me and that thing. The ravine eventually opened up into a clearing, and I spotted a ranger's cabin in the distance. Relief surged through me, though it was tempered by the realization that I wasn't out of the woods yet, literally or figuratively. The cabin was locked, but I found an axe leaning against the woodpile. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I crouched low, gripping the axe and scanning the tree line. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, every rustle of leaves setting my nerves on edge. When it came, it was sudden. The creature barreled into the clearing, moving faster than seemed possible for its lanky frame. I swung the axe as it charged, catching it in the shoulder. The impact staggered it, but the thing didn't go down. It lashed out with its talons, grazing my arm and drawing blood. We circled each other, predator and prey, roles blurring. I swung again, aiming for its head this time. The blade connected with a sickening crunch, and the creature let out a piercing screech. It collapsed, twitching violently before going still. I didn't stick around to admire my handiwork. With my arm bleeding and my ankle screaming in pain, I limped back toward the trailhead, keeping an eye on the shadows. I flagged down the first car I saw, a bewildered couple who probably thought I'd lost my mind. Years later, I avoid Mount Hood. Not because I'm scared, but because I've learned to stick to places where nature follows the rules, or at least pretends to. In 2000, I'd been working as a park ranger in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, Alaska, for about 8 years. It wasn't a glamorous job, but I liked it because no one bothered me out here. No traffic jams, no emails flooding my inbox, and no office small talk about the weather. I was in charge of patrolling some of the most remote parts of the park, places so isolated that if you found yourself lost, you'd wish you had at least brought along someone who could dig a decent grave. My name's Jason Shaw. I was raised in Tennessee, nowhere fancy, just a regular town where people got up early, worked all day, and went home to eat microwave dinners. I never really had much of a family. My mom died when I was a kid, and my dad was one of those men who thought hugs and words of encouragement were for soft people. So I grew up tough, but not by choice. Maybe that's why I ended up out here, because being surrounded by trees and mountains felt less complicated than being around other people. Plus, Alaska's wildlife was the only company that didn't make me want to punch something. That day, I was heading out to check an old ranger cabin deep in the forest. It was part of my routine, a hike that took me nearly 3 hours each way. These cabins weren't used much anymore, but we kept them stocked and ready just in case some hikers got lost or a blizzard hit unexpectedly. I'd heard some local chatter about strange sightings out this way, but honestly, Alaska is filled with weird stuff. People come up here, get lost in their own heads, and start thinking the moose are watching them, or that the northern lights are spelling out secret messages. You get used to it. I wasn't expecting any real trouble, just a long hike and maybe some scattered snowfall by dusk. The forest was dense, the kind of place where even your own footsteps sound foreign after a while. There was this cold silence out there that made you feel like the trees were holding their breath. It's a feeling that gnaws at you, like you're not alone, even though you are. By the time I reached the cabin, I was regretting not bringing a flask. The place looked about as welcoming as an abandoned crypt, half buried in snow, with its wooden door hanging crooked like someone had been in a hurry to get out. The windows were frosted over, but I could see the faint shapes of the furniture inside, untouched and still. The air around it felt heavier, like the trees themselves were leaning in, curious. As I stepped inside, I noticed the firewood pile had been knocked over, and the faint smell of something I couldn't place lingered in the air, like damp fur or something else. Something metallic, maybe. Some hikers had probably stayed the night and left in a rush. It wasn't unusual, especially if they'd spotted a bear or one of Alaska's more intimidating residents. I was about to radio in when I saw it. Blood. Not a lot, just a few droplets, but it was fresh, stark against the dirty wooden floor. My mind immediately went to the usual suspects, injured wildlife, maybe even a hunter who got too close to his own game. But something didn't sit right with me about the scene. It wasn't the amount of blood, it was the placement, the way the drops seemed to form a trail leading deeper into the woods. Great, I thought. Another lost hiker. Probably spooked by a wolf or a wolverine. I grabbed my flashlight and started following the blood trail, but so every instinct in me telling me this was a bad idea. But hey, I wasn't going to leave someone out there to freeze or bleed out. Alaskan winters don't care how tough you think you are. They'll take you out without a second thought. The trail led deeper into the woods, winding between thick pines and jagged rocks. That's when I began to notice the tracks. They were odd, partially human but distorted. It looked like whoever had made them had been dragging something, or limping. No, more like staggering. And there were claw marks too, long and uneven, like something with large talons had swiped at the ground. My stomach dropped as I crouched down to get a closer look. I'm no stranger to strange prints, but these were something else. The size was wrong. Too big for a wolf and too narrow for a bear. I stood up, my breath hanging in the cold air, and suddenly I felt it. That deep, gut-wrenching realization that whatever made these tracks wasn't something I could explain with the usual suspects. I kept moving, slowly now, my senses on high alert. The woods around me felt wrong. The air was still, no sound of birds, no crunch of snow underfoot from wildlife. Just silence. I'd heard people talk about how quiet things get when predators are around, but this felt different, like the forest itself was waiting. Then I saw it. Or rather, I saw them. 3 bodies, half buried in snow, just past a small clearing. They were fresh. Too fresh. I could tell by the way the blood was still soaking into the snow. All 3 were missing limbs, their faces contorted in terror, eyes wide open, like they'd seen something worse than death itself. One of them looked like a hunter. He had on the kind of gear you'd expect from someone experienced out here. But experience didn't help him. My heart was pounding now. Not out of fear, out of sheer adrenaline. I took a step forward, and that's when I heard it. The sound of something heavy, something large, moving through the trees behind me. I didn't turn around immediately, mostly because I figured I'd regret it if I did. When I finally did look, I wished I hadn't. It stood maybe 20 yards away, partially hidden by the trees. Tall, easily over 8 feet, with hunched shoulders and thick, matted fur. Its limbs were long, too long, like a grizzly bear that had spent too much time in a blender. But the head was the worst part, elongated, almost canine, but twisted, like nature had tried to make a wolf and then gave up halfway through. Its mouth hung open, drooling, exposing a row of jagged teeth that looked more like broken glass than anything natural. And then it moved. Not quickly, but with purpose, lumbering through the snow like it didn't care that I was standing there, armed with nothing more than a radio and a flashlight. I wasn't a hero. I didn't try to take it on. Instead, I backed up slowly, keeping my eyes on it as it stalked toward me. My mind raced with every bad decision I'd ever made, and for a split second, I wondered if this was just a bad hallucination. Maybe I'd wandered into some leftover military testing zone and was about to become a statistic. But the smell, God, that smell. It hit me like a punch to the face. Decay, rot, and something else. Something unnatural, like sulfur mixed with blood. My legs finally kicked into gear, and I turned, running like hell through the woods, not caring which direction I was heading. The creature didn't make a sound as it followed, just the dull thud of its massive body moving through the snow. My lungs burned. My heart felt like it was going to explode, but I kept running, fueled by the very real possibility that if I stopped, I'd end up like those bodies in the clearing. I don't know how far I ran, but I eventually lost it. At least, I thought I did. The forest around me was pitch black now, and my flashlight was starting to flicker. The radio crackled uselessly in my hand. I stopped to catch my breath, leaning against a tree, trying to make sense of what the hell had just happened. And that's when I heard the scream. Close. Maybe 100 yards away. At first, I thought it was human. It wasn't. It was something trying to sound human, like a poor imitation. I don't know what came over me, but I started moving again, this time more cautiously. The scream came again, closer this time, and then I saw the source, another body. But this one was different. It was alive, barely. A woman, or at least what was left of her, was crawling through the snow. Her legs had been torn to shreds, and she was dragging herself forward, leaving a trail of blood behind her. I crouched down beside her, ready to help, but as soon as I touched her, I knew it was too late. She looked at me, her eyes wild with pain and fear, and then she whispered something I'll never forget. "It's not from here." Before I could ask her what she meant, she let out a final ragged breath and went still. I stood up, scanning the trees, my pulse hammering in my ears. Whatever had done this wasn't far. I needed to get out of here, fast. But as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something shiny poking out of the snow beside the woman's body. A camera, a small, handheld one. It looked like it had seen better days, but it was intact. I grabbed it, tucking it into my jacket pocket, and took off again, my mind racing with questions. Back at the ranger station, I didn't say a word to anyone. I just locked myself in the office, pulled out the camera, and hit play. The footage was shaky, the kind you'd expect from someone running for their life. It showed the forest, the snow, the trees blurring by as the person holding the camera sprinted. And then for a split second, there it was. The creature. Its massive form loomed in the background, moving too quickly for something that size. And then the screen went black. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to process what I'd just seen. Eventually, I knew I had to do something. The next morning, I handed the camera to my supervisor without saying much. "You're not going to believe this," I said. He watched it, his face going pale. After a few minutes, he turned it off and looked at me. "Let's keep this between us for now," he said. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because, deep down, I knew that whatever it wasn't something anyone else needed to know about. Alaska had its secrets, and I had just stumbled upon one I wished I hadn't. The next day, the cabin was burned down, by accident. Let's just say I got a promotion after that. And they finally put a flask in my ranger kit. Not that I needed one. I quit drinking after that night. No use trying to forget what you can't explain. My name is Gabriel Allen, and back in 2021, I had an unforgettable experience in the remote reaches of Denali National Park, Alaska. As an ecologist with a penchant for adventure, I thought spending a summer studying alpine flora would be both fulfilling and, dare I say, a walk in the park, literally. I had always been fascinated by the rugged beauty of Alaska. The towering peaks, the sweeping glaciers, and the untouched wilderness called to me like a siren song. When the opportunity arose to join a small research team studying plant life above the tree line, I jumped at the chance faster than a cheetah on energy drinks. Our team consisted of 4 members. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a seasoned botanist with a sharp wit. Alex Kim, a graduate student who could find humor in the driest of lands. Sarah Oli, a wildlife photographer whose lens captured more than just images. And me, the guy who thought bear spray was an acceptable substitute for cologne. We set up our base camp miles away from any semblance of civilization. The idea was to immerse ourselves completely, to live and breathe the environment we were studying, or, as Alex put it, to become one with the moss. The first few days were idyllic. We cataloged rare plants, marveled at the expansive landscapes, and even had a friendly competition to see who could make the best dehydrated meal. Spoiler alert, they all tasted like cardboard, but at least mine had a hint of oregano. One evening, as we sat around the campfire swapping stories, Sarah mentioned she'd spotted unusual tracks earlier that day. They were huge, like if a grizzly decided to moonlight as Bigfoot, she joked. We all chuckled, but Dr. Vasquez seemed intrigued. Maybe it's a new species, she mused. Alex raised an eyebrow. Yeah, and maybe the squirrels are plotting to steal our trail mix. The next morning, curiosity got the better of us. We decided to follow the tracks, partly out of scientific interest and partly because, well, who doesn't love a good mystery? The footprints led us deeper into the wilderness, an area not marked on any of our maps. The further we went, the more the forest seemed to close in around us. The trees stood taller, their branches intertwining like the fingers of giants. It was as if we had stepped into another world, one where we were decidedly unwelcome. Anyone else getting the feeling we're being watched? I quipped, trying to lighten the mood. Sarah nodded, her camera clicking away. If we are, I hope it's my good side. We stumbled upon a clearing where the tracks abruptly ended. In the center stood the massive carcass of a moose, or at least what was left of it. The body was torn apart, limbs scattered, and the ground soaked with blood. It was a gruesome sight, enough to make a butcher turn vegan. Dr. Vasquez approached cautiously, her professional demeanor masking any revulsion. These injuries aren't consistent with any known predator in the area, she observed. Unless the wolves have started using chainsaws, Alex muttered under his breath. As we examined the scene, a foul stench filled the air, a mix of decay and something indescribably foul. It was so thick you could practically spread it on toast. Not that you'd want to. Suddenly, a rustling noise echoed from the tree line. We all froze. Probably just the wind, I offered, though the quiver in my voice betrayed me. The rustling grew louder, more deliberate. Whatever was making that sound was big, and it was getting closer. Maybe we should head back, Sarah suggested, her eyes darting around nervously. Dr. Vasquez nodded. Agreed. We've seen enough for today. We retraced our steps, but the forest seemed different now, darker, more oppressive. The path we had taken had somehow vanished, and the GPS was nothing more than a glorified paperweight without signal. Fantastic, Alex grumbled. Lost in the Alaskan wilderness with a mystery creature, just what I signed up for. As we pressed on, the feeling of being watched intensified. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves had us on edge. I tried to crack a joke, something about us starring in our own reality show, Survivor Denali Edition, but it fell flat. Out of nowhere, a deafening howl shattered the silence. It wasn't like anything we'd ever heard, a deep, primal sound that reverberated through the trees. What in the world was that? Sarah exclaimed, gripping her camera like a lifeline. Before anyone could answer, a massive figure burst through the underbrush. It moved on all fours, but its gait was all wrong, too fluid, too calculated. Covered in coarse fur, it was like a wolf stretched to unnatural proportions, muscles rippling under its matted coat. Run, Dr. Vasquez shouted, snapping us out of our stupor. We bolted, adrenaline fueling our sprint through the dense forest. Behind us, the creature gave chase, its heavy footfalls echoing like a drumbeat. Alex was the first to falter. He tripped over an exposed root and went down hard. I skidded to a halt, torn between survival instinct and the need to help my friend. Without thinking, I doubled back, grabbing his arm. Come on, buddy, this isn't the time for a nap. We stumbled forward, but it was too late. The creature was upon us. It swiped at Alex with a clawed hand. No, more like a paw with elongated fingers tipped with razor-sharp claws. The impact sent him crashing into a tree trunk, his body slumping to the ground. Alex, I screamed, but there was no response. Blood pooled beneath him, a stark contrast against the mossy earth. Dr. Vasquez pulled me back. We have to keep moving, she urged, her eyes wide with fear yet steely with determination. Sarah was ahead of us, frantically searching for any recognizable landmark. We broke through the tree line into another clearing, this one with a sheer drop on the other side, a cliff overlooking a rocky ravine. Dead end, Sarah whispered, panic creeping into her voice. The creature emerged from the forest, blocking our only escape route. It stood upright now, towering over us. Its face was a grotesque blend of human and animal features, with a snout like a wolf and eyes that gleamed with a predatory intelligence. "Any brilliant ideas?" I asked, my attempt at humor falling flat. Dr. Vasquez glanced at the flare gun attached to her belt. "It's not much, but it's something." She aimed and fired. The flare hit the creature square in the chest, igniting its fur. It let out a screech, a high-pitched wail that sent shivers down my spine. Taking advantage of its momentary distraction, we skirted around it, making a break for the forest. We didn't stop until we reached our camp, collapsing near the tents. "We have to call for help," Dr. Vasquez said between gasps, reaching for the satellite phone. Her hands were shaking. "No signal," she muttered, slamming it down. "Figures," I sighed. "We finally need technology, and it's as useful as a chocolate teapot." A deep snarl emanated from the shadows beyond our campfire's glow. "It's here," Sarah whispered, eyes wide. The creature lunged from the darkness. Targeting Dr. Vasquez, before we could react, it slashed at her, and she fell lifeless to the ground, blood spattering across the tent canvas, a horrifying painting of our grim reality. Acting on pure instinct, I grabbed the nearest object, a cast-iron skillet from our cooking gear. "Time to fry this overgrown mutt," I muttered. Sarah and I positioned ourselves on opposite sides, trying to confuse it. "Hey, ugly, over here!" I shouted, waving my makeshift weapon. The creature turned its gaze toward me, snarling. Sarah took the opportunity to grab a flare from Dr. Vasquez's fallen gear. She ignited it, the bright light causing the creature to recoil. "Now!" she yelled. Seizing the moment, I swung the skillet with all my might, connecting with the creature's jaw. It stumbled backward. More surprised than hurt. "Guess you're not a fan of home cooking," I quipped. But our victory was short-lived. The creature regained its footing, its eyes now filled with rage. It charged at me, and I braced for impact. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air. The creature stopped mid-stride, a tranquilizer dart protruding from its neck. From the trees emerged a group of people dressed in tactical gear. "Stand down," one of them shouted. The creature swayed before collapsing to the ground. "Who are you?" I demanded, both relieved and baffled. The apparent leader approached. "Federal Wildlife Control," he stated curtly. "You're lucky we got here when we did." "Lucky's one word for it," Sarah muttered. They secured the creature with heavy chains, hauling it onto a reinforced vehicle. "What is that thing?" I asked. The man glared at me. "Classified," he replied. "But let's just say it's a genetic anomaly we've been tracking." "Classified? 2 of our team members are dead," I shouted, anger boiling over. He paused. "I'm sorry for your loss, but this area was supposed to be off limits. Didn't you receive the notices?" We exchanged glances. "No, we were given full clearance for our research. Dr. Vasquez handled all the permits." Something wasn't adding up. They escorted us back to civilization, but warned us to keep silent about the incident. "For your safety and others," their leader emphasized. Back home, I couldn't let it go. I started digging, using every connection and resource available. What I found was both astounding and disturbing. Deep in the archives of government experiments, I uncovered references to a project aimed at creating super soldiers by combining human and animal DNA. Cliché, perhaps, but the evidence was there. Reports of test subjects escaping into the wild, cover-ups of civilian deaths, and areas quietly quarantined under the guise of wildlife preservation. The creature we encountered wasn't a mythical beast or an undiscovered species. It was a man-made abomination, a testament to humanity's hubris. In the end, the truth was more terrifying than any monster. My name is Kevin Scott. I'm 31 years old, and I swear to God, everything I'm about to tell you is real. It happened 2 years ago in the middle of Green Swamp Wilderness Preserve, Florida. I wish I had listened to the warning. It started as a weekend trip, just 4 of us. Me, my old Army buddy Travis, my best friend Ryan, and his girlfriend Jessie. Ryan was obsessed with urban legends, always chasing cryptid stories and internet horror nonsense. He had been talking for weeks about La Bruja, a swamp witch that supposedly haunted the backwoods of Florida, stealing souls and driving people insane. I should have told him to shut up and pick a normal vacation spot. We set off in Travis's beat-up RV, a clunky relic that rattled like a tin can every time we hit a pothole. The trip was supposed to be fun. Campfires, fishing, and beers under the stars. Just some time away from the city. Instead, it became the worst night of my life. The first sign of trouble came before we even got there. At a gas station just outside the swamp, an old man sitting on the porch stared at us like we were already dead. He spat into a tin cup and said, "Y'all ain't got no business out there." Ryan, grinning like an idiot, asked if he believed in the stories. The old man's face darkened. "Once you hear the singing, it's already too late." Travis laughed it off. Jessie rolled her eyes. I felt something tighten in my chest. We drove into the wilderness, deeper than I liked. No cell signal, no GPS. After a while, just miles of swamp, trees like skeletal hands reaching toward the sky. It was nearly sunset when we finally parked the RV in a clearing by the water. The first thing I noticed? The silence. No birds, no bugs, not even the hum of mosquitoes. Just dead air, thick with humidity and something I couldn't name. We set up a fire, cooked some canned chili, and cracked open a few beers. The tension eased. Even I started to relax. Then, just after midnight, Ryan disappeared. I woke up to Jessie shaking me. "Kevin, Scott's gone." The fire was just smoldering embers, casting long shadows on the trees. Travis sat up, groggy, rubbing his face. We found Ryan's boots and clothes neatly folded on a log near the water. His camera was still there, turned off. No tracks leading away. No sound. Jessie panicked. "We need to look for him, now." "Hell no," I said. "We wait until morning. We don't go into the swamp at night." But she wasn't listening. She grabbed a flashlight and stormed off. Travis and I had no choice but to follow. The deeper we went, the more wrong everything felt. The trees started to look the same, like we were walking in circles. My watch said 2:14 a.m., but the moon hadn't moved. Then we heard it, a woman humming, soft, eerie, like an old lullaby. Travis froze. "That ain't Jessie." The light from Jessie's flashlight flickered in the distance. She screamed. We ran toward her, found her standing in a knee-deep pool of water, shaking. I saw him. "Ryan?" She nodded. "He was standing right there. But his eyes were black, pitch black. He smiled at me." I turned my flashlight on the water. Nothing, just ripples. Travis grabbed my arm. "Kevin," I turned. A woman was standing in the trees. She was impossibly tall, skin stretched tight over her bones. Her face was wrong, her mouth too wide, her fingers too long, and her eyes, black pits. Empty. She smiled. The flashlight died. Something yanked Travis into the water. He screamed, thrashing as unseen hands pulled him under. I lunged, grabbed his arm. Jessie screamed beside me. I pulled hard. Something let go. Travis gasped, coughing up swamp water, but his back was covered in deep claw marks, bleeding through his shirt. We ran. Somehow, we made it back to the RV. We barricaded ourselves inside, locked the doors, closed the curtains. Jessie sobbed. Travis groaned in pain. I checked the gashes on his back. They weren't just wounds. They were symbols. Then Ryan knocked on the door. Jessie moved to unlock it, but I grabbed her wrist. "Look at his eyes," I whispered. Through the window, I saw him standing in the moonlight, smiling, too wide, his black eyes gleaming. "Let me in, guys," he said. His voice layered. His and something else. Jessie broke. "It's him. We have to let him in." Travis, still weak, just muttered, "Don't. Don't." I grabbed my knife. Ryan kept knocking, louder, then pounding. I stepped forward, gripping the handle, my heart slamming in my chest. Then Ryan stopped. Silence. I peeked out the window. Gone. We didn't sleep. Every few minutes I swore I heard whispering outside, soft laughter, scratching on the walls. Around dawn, Jessie had had enough. She grabbed a backpack. "I'm going for help." I grabbed her arm. "No, you're not." She shook me off. "I can't stay in here, Kevin. I can't." She ran outside before I could stop her. She screamed. I bolted after her. Nothing. Just her flashlight on the ground. She was gone. Vanished. Travis and I sat there in stunned silence. I wanted to cry, to scream, but I couldn't. Then Ryan came back. He walked right out of the trees, smiling, naked except for his jeans. His eyes, normal again, his voice, his own. "What's wrong?" he asked. "You guys look like you've seen a ghost." Travis whispered, "No, no." I clenched my knife. "Where's Jessie?" Ryan tilted his head. "Who's Jessie?" My stomach dropped. Travis lost it. He grabbed a tire iron and swung at Ryan, but Ryan moved too fast, too fluid. He caught the iron mid-swing. Smiled. "Don't do that, buddy." I grabbed Travis and dragged him back toward the RV. We locked the door, boarded up the windows with what little we had left. Ryan sat outside, just sat there, smiling, and night fell again. Travis stopped responding. He was burning up, feverish, and then the humming started again. Ryan started laughing. I heard Jessie's voice whisper through the walls. "Kevin, let me in." I closed my eyes, held my breath. At some point, Travis stopped breathing. Morning came. Ryan was gone. Travis was cold. I didn't wait any longer. I ran through the swamp, not stopping, not caring what was behind me. I ran until I saw a road. A trucker found me, half crazed, covered in mud and blood. They never found Travis's body, or Jesse's. They did find the RV, though. The doors ripped off. The inside, covered in deep claw marks. And Ryan? He was on the news a week later, found wandering near the swamp. No memory of what happened. He doesn't remember me. But sometimes I wake up at night and I hear the humming. My name is Timothy Perez, and in 2015, I ventured to Isle Royale in Michigan to escape the bustle of city life. I'd always been the kind of guy who preferred the whisper of the trees over the honking of horns, and this remote island seemed like the perfect getaway. I arrived on a chilly morning, the kind where your breath fogs up like a bad magic trick. The ferry ride over Lake Superior was uneventful, save for an older gentleman who warned me about the island's unpredictable weather. "If you don't like it," he chuckled, "just wait 6 minutes." I laughed it off, thinking I'd heard that joke in every town I'd ever visited. Isle Royale was everything I hoped it would be. Dense forests, crystal clear lakes, and trails that seemed to stretch on forever. I set up camp near Rock Harbor, not far from where the ferry had dropped me off. The plan was simple: hike, take photos, and maybe find some inspiration for the novel I'd been pretending to write for years. You know, the one where the hero saves the world and gets the girl, all while maintaining perfect hair. On my second day, I met a group of hikers, Tom, Lisa, and their teenage son Max. They were from Chicago and had that Midwestern friendliness that makes you feel like you've known them for years. We exchanged pleasantries, and they invited me to join them for dinner at their campsite. Never one to turn down free food, especially when my options were dwindling packets of instant noodles, I gladly accepted. As we sat around the campfire that evening, roasting marshmallows and swapping stories, Tom shared tales about the island's wildlife. "They say the wolves here are some of the most elusive creatures you'll never see," he said, poking the fire with a stick. "Maybe they're just introverted," I quipped. "Can't blame them for wanting some peace and quiet." Max rolled his eyes. "Dad thinks every rustle in the bushes is a wolf waiting to pounce." "Better safe than sorry," Lisa interjected, smiling warmly. The night sky was a canvas of stars, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. Little did I know that would be the last time things felt normal. The next morning, we decided to hike together to Mount Ojibwe, one of the island's higher points, promising breathtaking views. As we trekked through the forest, conversations flowed easily. Max complained about not having cell service. Tom told another one of his infamous dad jokes. "Why don't oysters donate to charity?" "Because they're shellfish." And Lisa kept us all in line with her motherly charm. About halfway up, we stumbled upon an old, abandoned ranger station. It looked like it hadn't seen maintenance since flip phones were cutting-edge technology. Curious, we decided to take a look inside. The door creaked ominously. Classic horror movie stuff, I know. The interior was sparse. A broken chair, a desk with outdated maps, and a musty smell that could have been bottled and sold as ode to neglect. Max found a faded journal tucked in a drawer. Flipping through it, his face paled. "Listen to this," he said. "June 5th, 1998, sightings of an unknown animal have increased. Rangers advised to travel in pairs. 2 hikers reported missing." "Probably just old campfire stories," I suggested, trying to lighten the mood. "Or maybe the previous ranger had an overactive imagination." Tom shrugged. "Still, maybe we should stick together. Safety in numbers, right?" We continued our hike, but the atmosphere had shifted. The forest seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. Even the birds had ceased their chatter. I joked that they must be on a union-mandated break, but no one laughed. Reaching the summit, the view was as spectacular as promised. Lake Superior stretched out endlessly, its waters glistening under the midday sun. We ate lunch in relative silence, the earlier unease still lingering. On our way back, we noticed something odd. The forest floor, which had been carpeted with leaves and twigs, now showed signs of disturbance. Deep gashes marred the trees, and patches of ground looked as though they'd been clawed by something large. "Probably a bear," Tom speculated, though his voice lacked conviction. "Do bears even live on this island?" Lisa asked, her eyes wide. Mostly wolves and moose, I replied, but I've never heard of moose doing this. Max snapped a few pictures. Maybe we'll go viral, he said, attempting a grin. Teen documents mysterious forest creature. Click here to find out what happens next. Let's keep moving, Tom suggested, picking up the pace. As we neared the split where we'd go our separate ways, me back to Rock Harbor, them to their campsite, Tom placed a hand on my shoulder. You sure you don't want to join us for dinner again? I smiled. Thanks, but I think I'll turn in early tonight. Besides, I can't mooch off you guys forever. Lisa handed me a walkie-talkie. Just in case. Channel 6, we'd feel better knowing we can reach you. I accepted it gratefully. Thanks, I'll be fine. What's the worst that could happen? We parted ways, and I headed back to my tent. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that danced eerily among the trees. I told myself I was being ridiculous. After all, I came here to escape stress, not invent new reasons for it. Settling into my tent, I decided to review the photos I had taken. Scrolling through the images, one caught my eye. It was from the summit, a panoramic shot. But there, among the trees, was a dark shape that hadn't been there before. Zooming in didn't help. It only made the image grainier. Probably just a trick of the light, I muttered. As night fell, the forest came alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the occasional snap of a twig. Nothing out of the ordinary. I crawled into my sleeping bag, grateful for its warmth. Sometime later, I awoke to a faint crackling sound. At first I thought it was rain, but the sky had been clear. Then I smelled it. Smoke. Unzipping my tent, I peeked outside to see a small fire burning near the tree line. That's not supposed to be there, I thought. Grabbing my flashlight, I cautiously approached. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't just a random blaze. It was a campfire. Around it lay scattered belongings. A backpack, a hat, a hiking boot. No signs of people, though. Hello? I called out. Anyone there? Silence. I noticed the backpack had a name tag, Kevin Moore. Rifling through it seemed invasive, but I was concerned someone might be hurt. Inside, I found the usual, water bottle, trail mix, a map, but also a journal. Flipping it open, the last entry read, "Something is following me. I can hear it at night. If anyone finds this." A chill ran down my spine. Not the figurative kind people write about, but a genuine, icy dread. Then, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. I decided to head back to my tent when the radio crackled. Just then, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night, echoing through the forest. It was human, filled with terror, and abruptly cut off. I sprinted back to my campsite, hands shaking as I fumbled with the walkie-talkie. Tom, Lisa, do you copy? Tom, Max, anyone? Finally, a crackling response. Timothy, what's going on? I heard a scream near my camp. Found someone's gear, but no person. Something's not right. Stay put. We're on our way, Tom replied. Minutes felt like hours as I waited. I kept the flashlight beam moving, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Then, in the periphery of the light, I saw it. A massive silhouette lurking between the trees. It moved with a fluidity that was unnerving for something its size. I pointed the flashlight directly at it. The creature resembled a wolf, but stood upright like a human. Its fur was a mottled mix of grays and blacks. Its snout was elongated, teeth glinting as it snarled, eyes fixed on me. It let out a sound that was somewhere between a howl and a roar. My mind raced. This can't be real, I thought. Did someone spike my trail mix? Fight or flight kicked in, and flight won by a landslide. I bolted in the direction I hoped was toward Tom and Lisa. Behind me, I heard the creature crashing through the underbrush, gaining ground despite my adrenaline-fueled sprint. Ahead, I saw the beam of another flashlight. Timothy, Perez's voice shouted. Run, I yelled. Go back. But it was too late. The creature lunged between us, grabbing Max with clawed hands. He screamed as it dragged him into the darkness. Max! Lisa shrieked, dropping to her knees. Tom grabbed her arm. We have to move! I stood there, paralyzed by shock. Tom shook me. Timothy, we need to get to safety now! We stumbled through the forest, the creature's guttural sounds echoing behind us. Reaching a rocky outcrop, we wedged ourselves into a narrow crevice. The creature couldn't fit but clawed at the entrance, its razor-like nails scraping against the stone. Lisa was sobbing uncontrollably. Tom held her, his face a mask of despair. We have to do something, I whispered. And what do you suggest? Tom snapped. Offered a s'more? Despite the dire situation, a hysterical laugh bubbled up. I always knew camping was a bad idea, I muttered. Next time, I'm sticking to Netflix and chill. Assuming there is a next time, Tom retorted. Hours seemed to pass as we huddled together. The creature eventually retreated, but we could hear it pacing nearby, waiting. We can't stay here forever, Lisa whispered. At dawn, we'll make a run for the ranger station, Tom decided. Assuming that place is still standing, I added. Morning light filtered in, and the forest took on an almost serene appearance, betraying the horrors of the night. We cautiously emerged, every snap of a twig making us jump. The trek to the ranger station was tense but uneventful. When we arrived, the place looked as abandoned as before, but it was our only hope. Inside, we found an old radio. Tom fiddled with it. Come on, he urged. Static. Then a voice. This is Ranger Dispatch. Identify yourself. Help, we're at the old ranger station on Isle Royale. Something attacked us. Our friend is missing. Tom blurted out. Stay where you are. We're dispatching a team, the voice replied. Hours passed, each minute stretching longer than the last. Suddenly, the door burst open. Not rescuers, the creature. It had tracked us. It lunged at Tom, who tried to fend it off with a rusted fire poker. Get Lisa out of here, he shouted. I grabbed Lisa's hand, pulling her toward the back door. We can't leave him, she protested. We don't have a choice. As we stumbled outside, a gunshot rang out. Startled, we turned to see Tom standing over the creature, a flare gun in his hands. The beast writhed on the floor, momentarily incapacitated. Didn't think that would actually work, Tom said, breathing heavily. We didn't waste time celebrating. Together, we ran toward the shoreline, hoping to signal any passing boats. Reaching the water's edge, we waved frantically as a ferry appeared in the distance. Behind us, the creature emerged once more, smoke still rising from its singed fur. It was wounded but relentless. Keep going, Tom urged. As the ferry drew closer, a group of park rangers aboard spotted us. And the creature. They shouted orders we couldn't make out, but their raised rifles were a welcome sight. A volley of shots rang out. The creature let out a final, agonized howl before collapsing. The rangers escorted us onto the ferry. One of them, a stern-looking woman named Officer Delgado, questioned us about the incident. You're lucky to be alive, she said. We've had reports of missing hikers, but nothing concrete until now. What was that thing? Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Officer Delgado exchanged glances with her team. We've got some theories, but nothing official. The island has its secrets. Back on the mainland, we gave our statements to the authorities. They assured us they'd investigate further, but something in their eyes told me they weren't expecting to find anything. A week later, news reports surfaced about the discovery of remains on Isle Royale, bones that didn't quite match any known species. Experts were baffled, speculating everything from undiscovered wildlife to elaborate hoaxes. As for Max, he was never found. A memorial service was held, but closure remained elusive. In the end, the island was closed to the public indefinitely. Official statements cited environmental concerns, but we knew better. I returned to city life, as the noise and crowds now a strange comfort. Occasionally, I'd catch myself scanning the headlines, looking for any mention of unexplained events in remote places. One day, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a journal, the same one I'd found at the abandoned camp. How it got to me, I had no idea. Attached was a note. Thought you might want this, Officer Delgado. Flipping through the pages, I noticed new entries in handwriting that wasn't mine. They detailed sightings of creatures across various national parks, all eerily similar to what we'd encountered. It seemed the island wasn't the only place hiding secrets. I closed the journal and stared out the window at the cityscape. Maybe isolation wasn't the escape I thought it would be. My name is Austin Gibson. I'm 42 years old, and I swear on everything I have left that what happened in Apalachicola National Forest was real. I don't drink anymore. I can't, because every time I do, I see that thing's face grinning back at me in the dark. I drove my old RV into the forest a few years ago, thinking I needed some time alone after the divorce. I wasn't sleeping much. My hands shook if I wasn't holding a beer. My ex-wife Lisa said I needed help, but what I needed was space. Silence. So I packed up took a few cases of whiskey, and drove out to the deepest part of Apalachicola, where no one would bother me. The road was bad, worse than I expected. The deeper I went, the more the trees closed in, thick moss hanging from the branches like dead fingers. I didn't see another car for miles. That's how I wanted it. Just me, the swamp, and enough liquor to make me forget why I was out there in the first place. I found a clearing near the water and parked. No cell service, no radio reception, just the sound of frogs and the occasional rustling in the brush. The air was thick, humid as hell, and the sun was already sinking. The first thing that went wrong was the RV's battery. I killed the engine, went outside to take a leak, and when I came back, the lights wouldn't turn on. No power, no reason for it either. The damn thing had been fine all the way there. I figured I'd deal with it in the morning. That night, I sat by the fire, drinking, trying not to think about Lisa or the divorce, or the fact that I had nowhere to go when I got back. Then the knocking started. Soft, like fingertips against the metal. I turned my head slowly toward the RV. Nothing. Probably a branch, I told myself. Or an animal. I went inside, locking the door behind me. I lay down on the small cot, listening. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up, my breath caught in my throat. It was coming from the other side now, near the back window. I grabbed my flashlight and yanked open the curtain. Nothing but darkness. I shut the curtain, turned over, and tried to sleep. At some point in the night, the radio turned on. It hadn't worked in years. The damn thing was busted, fried from an old battery issue. But now it crackled with static. And through it, a song started playing. Lisa used to love that song. But the lyrics were wrong. The voice singing was off, slow, stretched, like someone mimicking a record player at half speed. I yanked the power knob. The music stopped. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I went outside to check the engine. That's when I saw the footprints. Not mine. They circled the RV, stopping right outside my window. Bare footprints, too long, like the toes had been stretched out. I told myself it was some local screwing with me, someone trying to scare me off. I decided I'd had enough of that spot, so I packed up to leave. Got in the driver's seat, turned the key. Nothing. The RV wouldn't start. I opened the hood, checked the wires. Everything looked fine, but it was like the engine was just dead, like the damn thing had given up. I was stuck. That's when I saw the man in the trees, far off, just standing between the pines, his head tilted, watching me. I called out, but he didn't move. I took a step forward. "Hey, buddy, you lost?" He took a step back, fading into the shadows. I ran toward where he had been, but by the time I got there, the trees were empty. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing. I went back to camp, locking myself in the RV even though I knew that wouldn't do much. I spent the rest of the day trying to fix the engine, trying to find some rational explanation. Then the knocking came back. But this time, it was coming from the door. I froze. Knock, knock, knock. I swallowed hard, gripping the handle of my knife. Who's there? Silence. Then a voice. Low calm. "Danny." My breath hitched. "Lisa." I backed away from the door. The handle rattled. "Danny, let me in." My hands shook. My head felt light. I hadn't spoken to Lisa in weeks. She wasn't here. She couldn't be here. I peeked out the window. She was standing there. Lisa, in the blue dress she wore the night she left me. Her hair down. Her lips curled in that soft little smile she used to give me when we were happy. I squeezed my eyes shut. I was hallucinating. The booze, the stress, that was all it was. When I opened my eyes, she was closer, right outside the window, smiling, too wide, her lips curled back, revealing too many teeth. I screamed and threw myself back. The knocking stopped. I didn't open the door. I didn't sleep. The next day, I tried to hike out. No matter how far I walked, I always ended up back at the RV. By sunset, I was losing my mind. Then the park ranger showed up. He came walking down the path like nothing was wrong, clipboard in hand. "You lost, sir?" I ran up to him. "Jesus, man, you gotta help me. My RV's dead. Then I saw his badge. Holloway, my last name. I stepped back. "What the hell?" He just smiled. "You're not supposed to be here, Danny." I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, but no matter which way I went, I always ended up back at that damn RV. That night, the radio came on again. This time, it wasn't music. It was a voice, deep, laughing. "You're almost ready to let go." I covered my ears. "Shut up. Shut the hell up." The mirror in the RV cracked, and my own face smiled back at me. "Danny," it whispered. "You know why she left." I backed away, shaking. No. You were driving drunk. The air went out of my lungs. "You crashed." I shook my head. No, she left me." My reflection grinned wider. She didn't leave. She never left. And then I remembered. The rain that night, the headlights spinning, the crunch of metal. I never called the cops. I passed out, woke up in the wreckage, stumbled home, convinced myself she'd just left. But she was still out there, somewhere in the swamp, buried. I fell to my knees, my head in my hands. The voice whispered in my ear, "You can stay here, Danny, or you can let go." I don't know what made me do it, but I grabbed the bottle of whiskey and smashed it against the RV's floor. I lit a match. The fire spread fast. The voice screamed. The last thing I saw before I passed out, Lisa, standing in the flames, smiling. I woke up on the side of the road. My truck was there. The road was dry. The sky was clear. I drove out of that forest and never looked back. But sometimes, at night, I hear the knocking. And when I look in the mirror, I see my own face, smiling back. My name is Randy Smith, and back in 2018, I decided to take my RV up to Lake Superior Provincial Park in Ontario for some peace and quiet. Being cooped up in the city was starting to make me feel like a sardine in a can, and I figured some fresh air might do me good. Besides, I've always believed that nature and I have an understanding. I don't bother it, and it doesn't bother me. I've never been the rugged outdoorsman type. My idea of hiking involves a well-marked trail and a picnic at the end. But the allure of the open road and the promise of solitude were too tempting to pass up. So I packed my essentials, a week's worth of snacks, a stack of books I'd been meaning to read, and enough coffee to fuel a small army. The drive was picturesque, with the trees flaunting their autumn colors like they were showing off. By the time I reached the park, the sun was casting golden hues over the lake, and I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I found a secluded spot near the water, set up camp, and made myself a cup of coffee. This isn't so bad, I thought. Maybe I should write a book, Randy's Adventures in the Wild. As dusk settled, I decided to light a campfire. There's something hypnotic about watching flames dance. It's like nature's television. I was roasting marshmallows, because what's a camping trip without s'mores? When I heard footsteps crunching leaves behind me. "Evening," a voice said. I turned to see a man standing at the edge of my campsite. He was tall and gaunt, with unkempt hair and clothes that looked like they'd been through a war zone. His eyes had a peculiar glint, one that made me instinctively uneasy. "Evening," I replied cautiously. "Can I help you with something?" "Just passing through," he said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Name's Jedediah, but folks call me Jed." "Randy," I offered, though he hadn't asked. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" He stepped closer, eyeing the marshmallows. "Sure is. Mind if I join you for a bit?" Every alarm bell in my head was ringing, but I didn't want to be rude. Actually, I was just about to turn in, long drive and all. He tilted his head, the smile fading. "Fair enough. You take care now." "Will do," I said, watching as he disappeared into the shadows. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Well, that wasn't creepy at all," I muttered, deciding it was indeed time to call it a night. I extinguished the fire and secured the RV. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds chirping and the smell of pine. I convinced myself that I'd overreacted the night before. Maybe Jed was just a harmless drifter. After breakfast, I decided to explore a nearby trail. I left a note on the dashboard, a habit from watching too many true crime shows, grabbed my backpack, and set off. The trail was serene, with sunlight filtering through the canopy and leaves crunching underfoot. I was about an hour in when I noticed something odd, a campsite just off the path. But it looked abandoned. Curious, I ventured closer. Tents were collapsed, and belongings were strewn about as if the occupants had left in a hurry. Unease settled in my stomach. This is how people end up in horror movies, I joked nervously to myself. I decided to head back. As I turned, I nearly bumped into Jed. "Whoa, you startled me," I exclaimed. "Sorry about that," he said, though he didn't sound sorry at all. "What brings you here?" "Just hiking," I replied, trying to sound casual. "You?" "Same," he said, his gaze fixed on me. "Shame about what happened here." "Yeah, looks like they left in a hurry," he chuckled softly. "Or something made them leave." I swallowed hard. "Well, I should get going." "Don't let me keep you," he said, stepping aside. I walked briskly back to the trail, feeling his eyes on me the whole time. By the time I reached my RV, my heart was pounding. Maybe it's time to move on to another site, I thought. I started packing up when I heard a rustling behind me. I spun around, half expecting Jed, but it was another man, this one wearing a park ranger uniform. "Sorry to startle you," he said. "I'm Ranger Thompson, just making my rounds." "Oh, thank goodness," I sighed in relief. "Randy Farnsworth. Everything all right? You look a bit shaken." I debated whether to mention Jed, but decided I might sound paranoid. "Just had an odd encounter earlier. Do you know a man named Jedediah around here?" The ranger's expression darkened. "Jedediah Clark?" "Yeah, goes by Jed." He nodded grimly. "We've had reports about him. I'd advise you to be cautious. He's not well." "Not well how?" I pressed. "Look, it's probably best if you relocate to a more populated area of the park," he suggested. "Safety in numbers." "Understood," I said, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Thanks for the warning." As he left, I hurried to finish packing. Just as I was about to start the engine, I realized I'd left my map on the picnic table. I stepped out to grab it, when something heavy struck me from behind. Everything went black. I awoke to a splitting headache and found myself tied to a chair inside what looked like an old cabin. The room was dimly lit by a single lantern, casting eerie shadows on the walls adorned with hunting trophies. "Rise and shine?" came Jed's voice from the darkness. "What do you want?" I demanded, struggling against the ropes. He stepped into the light, a sinister smile playing on his lips. "Company. Is that too much to ask?" "Kidnapping isn't exactly the way to make friends," I retorted. He laughed. "Oh, but we're past pleasantries now. Look, if it's money you want—" "Money?" he interrupted. "You think this is about money? No, all this is about survival." "Survival?" He began pacing. "City folks like you come here thinking you own the place, leaving your trash, making noise, disrupting the balance. I'm sorry if I—" "Too late for apologies," he snapped. "You and your kind are a blight." "You're not making any sense," I said, trying to keep him talking while I worked at the knots. He pulled out a hunting knife, examining it thoughtfully. "Sense? Sense is living off the land, respecting its laws, not hiding in metal boxes on wheels." "Okay, noted. I'll just be on my way and promise to leave nature untouched," I said. He shook his head slowly. "Can't let you do that." Before I could respond, there was a loud bang on the door. "Jedediah Clark, this is Ranger Thompson. Open up!" Jed's eyes flickered with rage. "You just couldn't stay quiet, could you?" As he moved toward the door, adrenaline surged through me. I managed to loosen the ropes enough to free one hand. Without thinking, I grabbed a heavy wooden stool and waited. As Jed turned back, I swung with all my might. The stool connected with his shoulder, causing him to drop the knife and stumble. "You little," he growled. I didn't wait for him to finish. I bolted for the back door, bursting into the cool night air. My RV was parked nearby, and I sprinted toward it, fumbling with the keys. As I jumped inside and started the engine, I saw Jed appear in the side mirror, fury etched on his face. I didn't look back. Later, I learned that Jed had been evading capture for months. He was a former survivalist who lost his grip on reality after a tragic accident claimed his family. As for me, next time someone suggests a nature trip, I'll politely decline. I'm outdoorsy, in that I like having drinks on patios. My name is Austin Gibson, and this happened back in 2011 in Shawnee National Forest, Illinois, when I first took a temporary ranger job there to help with the busy fall season. Never suspecting I'd leave that place with shaking hands and a heart full of questions. I remember stepping into that small ranger station around late September, feeling pretty good because I'd managed to snag a cheap motel room in town that morning. I had a bland cheese sandwich for breakfast, just something out of the convenience store freezer section, and washed it down with watery coffee. I wore a faded uniform passed down from a previous hire who'd left mustard stains near the left pocket. It smelled like stale sweat and cheap detergent, but I was just glad to have work. I was 25, broke, and eager to prove myself reliable. I liked the quiet of the forest trails, the dense maples and oaks, and the smell of damp leaves after last week's rain. We had a small team, just me and 2 others on rotation that day. Tom, older and with a bushy beard that he tied with a rubber band, always joked about his ex-wife and how her new husband sold fancy lawnmowers. And Gina, in her early 40s, usually wore a baseball cap over short-cropped hair. She had a habit of humming some old tune I couldn't place whenever she got nervous. She'd say, "Pat, you know that feeling when you think the woods are just a bit too still?" I didn't know what she meant back then. I thought forests were supposed to be quiet. That morning, Gina handed me a radio and said, "Don't wander off without checking in. It's not summer camp season, but we still get the odd hiker." By noon, I was on a trail known as Pine Hollow Path, which, despite the name, had more oaks than pines. The canopy let through thin beams of light, and the forest floor was scattered with red and brown leaves. I came across a half-eaten energy bar wrapper on the path, which struck me as odd because we usually lectured visitors about leaving no trash. I stuffed it in my pocket. About an hour later, I stumbled on something far more disturbing, a torn jacket sleeve snagged on a low branch. It looked recent, maybe a day old, and the fabric was stiff with something dark. I didn't want to think about it. That's when I radioed Tom. "Hey, found a torn piece of clothing. Could be a lost hiker. Anything on the logs?" Tom answered with a yawn. "We had a party of 3 who checked in yesterday. They should have been out by now." That sent a chill into my chest, and I began scanning the underbrush with more care. I followed a faint trail of broken twigs and disturbed leaves off the main path. About 20 feet in, I smelled something unpleasant, like old meat left out on a warm countertop. I advanced slowly, heart tapping at my ribs. In a small clearing behind a fallen tree, I found the body of a man. He looked about 40, wearing a hiking vest and boots. His left arm lay twisted at a strange angle, and part of his torso had been torn open. The sight made my stomach lurch. I stepped back, pressed my hand against my mouth, and tried to breathe through it. Then I spoke into the radio with forced calm. "Tom," I said, "I've got a deceased male hiker here. Looks like an animal attack." Gina broke in, her voice uneasy. "Animal attacks are rare here. Are you sure?" I didn't answer her. I just gave them my coordinates. While I waited, I squatted down, thinking maybe the poor guy slipped and got mauled by a coyote or something. But coyotes don't usually leave bodies like that. I took in the surroundings, noticing deep scratches on a nearby tree trunk, higher than my shoulders. There was a pattern, something I couldn't quite place. But it definitely wasn't from a raccoon or a bobcat. When Tom and Gina arrived, they were both grim-faced. Tom tried to hide his shock. Gina stopped humming. She just stared and shook her head. We decided to search for the other 2 hikers from that party of 3. Tom radioed the station to call for authorities. We couldn't just leave, not with the possibility of survivors. We moved deeper into the woods, spreading out but staying close enough to yell if something happened. I remember wiping sweat off my forehead, even though it wasn't that hot. The silence weighed on me. Sometimes a branch cracked underfoot and I jumped. Then we found another body. This time, it was a woman, slumped against a boulder. Her pack was gone, her face frozen in a look of pain. She had similar wounds, and the ground around her was stained and scattered with damp leaves. I wish I hadn't eaten that cheese sandwich earlier. "Hello? Anybody out here?" I called. No answer. I heard Tom whisper, "This is bad, Pat." I nodded, my mouth dry. Gina, who walked a short distance away, suddenly shouted, "Found footprints!" We hurried over. There were large impressions in the soft earth, bigger than any mountain lion print I'd seen in guides. They looked like a cat's, but heavier. Deeper. "A cougar?" Tom asked. Gina shrugged. "Not impossible, but..." She trailed off. Something about these tracks bothered her. They showed long strides, more powerful than what we expected. We decided to keep searching for the 3rd hiker. The afternoon light was fading, and we had to use flashlights. Being out there as dusk approached set me on edge. I found myself talking just to break the tension. "Tom, remember that big raccoon we saw by the dumpsters yesterday?" Tom grunted. I tried a lame joke. "If that raccoon shows up now, I'll offer him my last candy bar to watch our backs." No one laughed. Then, at twilight, we heard a scream, quick and sharp. We ran toward it, stumbling over roots and rocks. We found the third hiker, alive at first. A young guy in his 20s, holding his side, crouched under a half-fallen tree. "Help!" he shouted, voice cracking. We rushed over, flashlights jumping. He looked terrified, eyes darting behind us as if expecting something to pounce. "It took them. It's out here." He didn't have to say more. We heard heavy steps in the brush, a soft rustling that made my skin prickle. We formed a semicircle around the wounded hiker, shining our beams into the dark trees. I saw a shape then, low and muscular, moving between trunks. No distinct silhouette, just movement. My heart thundered. Then it rushed forward. I could barely describe its form. A cat-like body, maybe 5 feet long, thick shoulders, dark fur that blended with the night. It moved quietly, at first. Then, thump! It slammed into the injured hiker. He screamed. We shouted, shining lights into its face. I saw powerful jaws flash open and close. The man's screams turned into choking gasps. I stepped forward, but Tom grabbed my shoulder. "Pat, no! It's too late." Gina swung her flashlight at the creature's head, and it hissed, a strange, sharp sound. Then it ran off into the darkness, leaving the man on the ground. He was gone. And that was only the beginning. We knelt beside him. He was gone. It had ended his life in seconds. Gina cursed under her breath. Tom looked like he might cry. I felt sick again, kneeling there, trying to hold my flashlight steady. Now we had 3 dead hikers, a killer animal somewhere in the woods, and night pressing in on all sides. We made a plan to retreat to the station. The radio crackled as we tried to call for backup. Spotty reception. "We need the phone," I said. Tom nodded. We hurried back along the trail, our flashlights bouncing over tree trunks and roots. Gina whispered, "Don't run. Running sets it off." We moved briskly but tried to look calm, which was impossible. I gripped my radio so hard my knuckles hurt. Halfway back, we realized something was keeping pace with us. Branches snapped lightly. I tried to catch a glimpse but only saw shifting silhouettes. We picked up speed. "I'll buy us all dinner if we get out of this," I muttered. No one responded. I suppose we all wanted to pretend we were anywhere else, maybe at a diner with French fries and milkshakes, not stuck in the dark with a vicious predator. At one point, Tom lagged behind to catch his breath. "Go ahead," he said. "I'll be right there." Gina and I stopped, turned back. "Don't be stupid," she said. "We stick together." He nodded and lumbered forward, chest heaving. He was bigger than me, maybe 50 pounds heavier, and the fear weighed on him. We formed a tight group, shining lights in every direction. The woods smelled damp and earthy, and every sound set me on edge. We reached a fork in the path. By then, I noticed fresh scratches on the bark of a large oak, long, parallel marks, too clean to be random. We heard a sudden snapping of twigs and spun around. The creature rushed past our lights so fast I barely saw more than a dark shape. Tom shouted, "There!" but it moved in a blur. Gina and I tried to stand back to back with him. We breathed in quick, shallow gasps. I held a length of sturdy branch I'd picked up, though I doubted it would help much. A moment passed, maybe less. Then it struck again, hitting Tom this time. I swung the branch wildly, hitting only air. I saw Tom on the ground, coughing, struggling. Gina screamed at me to help him. I knelt and tried to pull him up. His chest and shoulder were torn, and his hands shook as he reached for me. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I tried to stop the bleeding with my jacket, but it was too much. His eyes fluttered. I pleaded, "Come on, Tom. Don't leave me here, man." He said nothing else. Gina stood guard, flashlight shaking in her grip. The forest was too silent again. After a minute, I realized Tom was gone. My eyes stung with tears. I swallowed hard and said, "Gina, we have to run." We ran. I know I said not to run earlier, but we had no choice. Our boots pounded the dirt. The station wasn't far. The creature crashed through the brush behind us, keeping pace. My lungs burned, and my mind spun. I tried to recall if there was a service rifle locked at the station. Maybe. Maybe not. Anything would help. Gina was ahead of me, her flashlight beam shaking. We broke through the last stand of trees and saw the faint light from the station's bulb. I fumbled for the door, keys rattling. Inside, I slammed it shut and pushed a heavy cabinet against it. Gina collapsed into a chair, gasping. "We lost Tom," she said flatly. I nodded, pressing my forehead against the door. "We tried the landline phone. Static. We tried the radio. No immediate response. Maybe the call had gone out earlier and help was on the way. Maybe not. While Gina searched for a first aid kit, I peered out a small window. Nothing but darkness and the suggestion of trees. I listened hard, hearing only the hum of the station's small fridge. There was a box of flares on a shelf, and I pulled one out, thinking maybe we could signal someone. I waited, half expecting the animal to burst in. But it didn't. Hours passed. Gina stayed quiet. I remember rummaging through a drawer and finding a half-eaten bag of pretzels. My throat was too tight to swallow. As the first hint of dawn broke, we dared to open the door a crack. The forest looked normal. Dew on leaves. Pale light filtering through. No sign of the creature. No strange prints by the door. Nothing. We stepped outside, tense, every sense sharpened. We didn't talk about going back to look for the bodies. We just knew we had to get the proper authorities and show them. We found a ranger truck behind the station, old, but it ran. Gina drove while I clutched the flare gun. My hands trembled with every bump in the dirt road. We made it out. But we carried what we saw inside our minds. When the sheriff's deputies and wildlife officers arrived later that day, they searched in teams, rifles ready. They found the bodies. They found unusual tracks. But I